I'd like to call the March 2nd, 2020 school committee meeting to order. And first up is celebrate student learning, health education.
Excellent.
Mr. Lemire and his students, they've got a nice presentation for you.
All right. So last night I had this thought. I just thought of the experiences. I'm like, they're authentic, they're collaborative, they're engaging, and they're rooted in standards. And I'm like, they're ACEs. It just came to me. So I'm going to stick with ACEs for tonight. So we're going to share a few, I think, ACE experiences at one elementary, one middle, and one at the high school. I'm very proud to work with a diverse set of programming that I work. You can see it's from business education, health education, to family and consumer sciences, to physical education, pre-K through 12. It involves internship program as well. I want to get things started with Mr. Rob Green. So, Rob, I'll let you provide the context too.
Yeah, this is a 5th grade health lesson for first aid. And we had the opportunity to bring the fire department in, where they were able to demonstrate handling CPR, wrapping wounds, and also splinting. Then, so the next slide. Yeah, and you can see here, the top left, Mrs. Chivaroli, he had her son Paul at home. So I reached out to her, and she was able to come in with one of her colleagues and was able to work with us with the kids. It's a great experience. The kids loved it. And then what we did was, after that, we had a choice board. And they take this choice board, and they're allowed to pick any way so that they can demonstrate their learning. And one of the things I'm going to show you right now is a video. And this is a rap that was created by one of our students, Elena Riedel. And unfortunately, after she wrote it, I was able to get together with Mr. Munt. And he was able to put a background to the music. And so we had two performers in here, Elena and Rose. And it's actually great.
You guys ready for the skills, right? Without further ado.
Your friends stop breathing and you don't know what to do. You should call 911 if you know what's good for you. There are 3 more steps, no less, to put your first aid skills to the test. 1, put your hand in the middle of the chest. At the other, start pumping to stop cardiac arrest. 2, pump 100 times a minute. This makes 1 breath. You're almost to the finish. 3, good job. You're almost done. Now, just wait for the ambulance to come. About 60 times a minute in the middle of the chest. Good work. You just stopped cardiac arrest.
So that's one of the things that we're really fortunate, as we, Rob was a talented PE teacher, and we've grown into the health education piece, and as I've time to collaborate through early release PD days and collaboration opportunities, we're able to really cultivate some really nice teaching practices that embrace some of the personalized learning goals that we have. And in this case, there was voice and choice infused there for students to be able to demonstrate their learning in multiple ways, and in this case, this was a neat rap. Certainly beats a standardized or objective type of test, right, to demonstrate their knowledge, and they got a heck of a lot more fun. So, Rob, thank you for your hard work. Thank you for sharing that with our department members as well.
Yep.
Thank you. Next, our middle school applied nutrition program. Mr. Cherner and Ms. Heffernan here tonight to bring some context to it. We've got a little video to show you there as well. In this case, it's a PBA on a novice nutrition. Novice nutritionist, we'll circle back to that, but Mr. Cherner, just if you wanted to provide a little context to some of the experiences, because we teach multiple grades at Gates with it.
Sure. Yeah. like, I just think that, like, if you look at what other schools do and what we do in health and applied nutrition, I just think our kids have unique opportunities. Like, I think the new building has allowed our kids to have opportunities they wouldn't have. Like, it's nice to talk about foods and say, like, oh, hey, this is a great way to, like let's use smoothies, and you can put spinach in it, and, like, you won't know the difference. And the kids were like, yeah, no, I'll know the difference. But our kids, what we were able to do is we're able to give them the options of, like, doing these taste tests, and you'll see an image, and actually it's up there right now, of kids doing blindfold taste tests where they're basically given one that has spinach in it, one that doesn't, and then they're asked afterwards, hey, which one is it? About half the time they're wrong, or they figure it out, but they really can't, it's not significant difference. And then about another half of the time they actually like the one that has spinach better, and so there's a lot of disappointment on their end when we kind of it's like, hey, we just showed you, like, you can incorporate that. And so what you're going to see in our video, the applied nutrition piece, is that there's a lot of different ways that kids experience different foods that they wouldn't normally eat. And I would say in every single lab, when the question comes up, like, hey, did you try something new, and were you surprised you like it? Like, we see hands shooting up, and so that's kind of the cool thing. And we've done a really nice job, I think, of, like, finding ways to, like, just take things that we talk about in nutrition. Like, we talk about the whole concept of, like, having yogurt in smoothies, and if it says fruit at the bottom, it also means they've added a bunch of sugar. So we give the kids the opportunity to have yogurt, add your own fruit, and see how it tastes. And, like, it's always a big hit. So we just found a lot of fun ways to kind of incorporate foods and really relate it to what we do. And sort of, like, kind of the reward at the end of everything is, like, with all of our recipes is, as a teacher, when they're like, hey, can I take that recipe home? And so I think we're seeing a lot of that, and I hear a lot of feedback from parents where they're like, hey, my kid brought the recipe home, and they make it every day, or we have it once a week. So that's kind of the reward from our perspective.
One thing to celebrate the hard work of the team is there isn't a student that can't participate, right? We have students with some food allergies in our schools, and the levels of checks and balances and collaborations with the kids and families and health services, I'm very proud of. There's never I've seen labs with 36 kids, a foods lab, a lot of logistics and management in there. I want to commend the diligence and the purposeful inclusion of every student. So there isn't an Aspen file that we don't look at to make sure that we're keeping kids safe, but also able to celebrate. Quick video to bring it to life because of good work here by the team.
The new Gates Middle School building allows our students to apply their nutrition knowledge in ways that were not previously possible. Through applied nutrition lessons, students learn important vocabulary related to taste, flavor, texture, and appearance, and how this applies to foods they prefer. Students no longer simply describe foods in our class as yummy or yucky. Students learn to make more nutrient-dense choices by adding their own fruit to yogurt. 6th graders add vegetable to pizza to show how we can add vegetables to foods that we already love without sacrificing taste. Seventh graders learn how to make breakfast from scratch and how to create a 3 out of 5 food group breakfast through our applied nutrition labs. Most of them can't tell, and as a result have gained a new tool to add vegetables into their day. Nutrition activities and applied nutrition lessons have gotten students to the point that they can evaluate nutrition information and provide effective feedback to their peers about the successes that they see in their eating and the areas that need improved. As part of the students' project-based assessment, they interviewed a student from the other health class to learn more about what they eat so they could make recommendations that will help improve their day. After completing interviews, students applied their knowledge gained over the last 3 years to create a nutritionist toolbox that outlined the food groups and 6 essential nutrients. Students got feedback on their analysis and made changes before a meeting with their partner to review their suggestions. Students then wrote at least one SMART goal based on their partner's recommendations and worked to meet that goal over the course of the rest of the mini-master. The opportunity to apply nutrition concepts in our new building has been invaluable to our students' learning and is best expressed by our students.
Hi, I'm Annalise Sturdy from McMillan, and And my favorite part of the nutrition project that we did, wellness, was probably interviewing other people to see what type of foods like they ate and what I could try to incorporate in my everyday eating habits.
I agree with Annie. Interviewing was really fun because it kind of gives you like a different look at how people like eat and what they eat like a day, and you could like incorporate other things like healthy foods or like maybe unhealthy foods that you like, and it's kind of fun.
I thought it was really interactive and gave me a better understanding of what type of foods we should eat on a daily basis or weekly, and what type of balance we need in our everyday diets.
Yeah, and I thought it was fun, and it was kind of like a different way to do like working and like projects and stuff, and it gave us like a way better understanding of like how things work and how to have like better nutrition.
And that project that they were talking about was the novice nutritionist. Ms. Heff, do you have any context? Because you helped facilitate that with Ms. Mulvaney, right?
Yep, so it was just an opportunity for them to pull together all of their learning from 6th and 7th grade. Now that they have all of this foundation, that they could share that knowledge with one another and apply it in a meaningful way. One of our colleagues, Allison, is a nutritionist outside of her school day. And so she was able to bring her professional experience to teach them what her job involved, and then they were able to be novice nutritionists. And really it stretched over a couple of days since they interviewed, and then they analyzed their partner's food, then they shared back their analysis, and they set goals based on what each other had suggested. So I think it was a great idea, a great way to bring what she does and then to translate that to their application. Because we do struggle with application, of course, because although we are cooking with them, we like to see what happens outside of the classroom and what happens when they go home. And so this project was able to get us outside of the school building and bring that in.
Thank you, Ms. Heff. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To take us home, just elementary, middle school example, high school example involving nutrition and well-being. Brought some of my senior friends from our internship program here tonight, Anna, Colleen, and Brady. Just wanted them to share a little bit about their experiences of their internship experiences with me and at Holly Hill this past fall. Yeah?
Okay, so I'm going to go first. So, hi, I'm Anna. I obviously took Mr. Ranieri's class, and I loved it because I'm here talking to you about it. So, but I found out about the class because my sister and her friends took it, and my sister and I are very different people. Like, she's a math major, I'm going into political science, and for a lot of other reasons, but she told me it doesn't matter like what you're interested in, this class is really beneficial, it's really great, so I decided to take it and put it in my schedule. And one thing that I really appreciate about this course is that I would say overall it's kind of like a senior privilege almost, because seniors take the course, and a lot of times we're like promised a lot of stuff, and like the senior cap is fun, but like kind of being able to actually be treated like an adult, like inside Mr. Ranieri's class, was really helpful. And I think like through stuff we did in class, like the triangle of trust, which was kind of like between us, him, and our intern, like our internship or like whoever we're working with, was really helpful because it kind of sounds like silly, like the triangle of trust, but it kind of makes you realize like in the real world there are expectations that sometimes we're guided a little bit through high school, even though we're like technically adults, but it's kind of like learning how on your own to make these relationships. And I know that we connected with, not like we thought we were just working with John Belber, but we ended up connecting with pretty much the entire staff. And now even like I have some connections outside of that, like to help me get a job over the summer. And it's just been like really great inside of class to kind of talk about college and like where that can lead you, how much you're spending inside and outside, like what your job means, like your priorities in life, like you know, what are your benefits, like will that matter to you, what matters more, money or time, or like location for someone like this obviously would be their main priority at a farm. But so inside the classroom I would say we learned a lot about kind of becoming an adult and like growing into your own. Do you want to go?
Thank you, Anna.
My name's Colleen. I totally agree with everything that Anna said about what we learned inside the class about responsibilities, becoming an adult, and like either, you know, going into the workforce. Some people in my class were either going straight to the workforce or going into college, so that was just really beneficial, being able to be treated as an adult, because like many people in the class actually are legal adults. But at the internship itself at Holly Hill Farm, for me personally, I never really clicked with a lot of science classes that I had taken throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. It just wasn't really my thing. But at Holly Hill Farm, like, I know like the middle school teachers are talking about project-based learning. Like, this is like about the most project-based learning thing you could do. They put you on the farm for like an hour, hour and a half every day. You can do manual labor, they'll teach you about sustainability, and you can like work with the elementary school kids that they have at the farm. Or you can go around with other farmers, not just Mr. Belberg, and they'll teach you all the ways how a farm works, infrastructure within the farm to keep it organized, all these different things. So if anything, this was probably like the most science-based experience I've taken throughout the public school system that has actually like rang true with me, and that I'll probably carry with me like throughout my experiences in the real world. So.
Hi, I'm Brady Conlon, and I have to say, like, along with what they're saying, my favorite part of the class and the internship was actually seeing like the business side of everything for the farm, and a lot of the opportunities that he kind of showed us and experience he gave us just by like watching John Belber, who was our like head intern, guide basically sponsor, and seeing the connections he's already made with these businesses, and also he let us make more connections with the businesses too. One of the biggest things that we went around on like at least once a week to a lot of coffee shops or restaurants, and they had compost buckets that he talked to them, and he was able to make deals where they could reduce waste, and he could take those buckets of food that was going to be thrown away and use it to make mulch for the farm, and with that mulch you would then start preparing the soil for the fields. And we also saw the whole process, seeing like these linkage to the classes from like biology and history, the supply side of things, and the process that these plants is going through. If we're preparing the soil with this mulch we're getting from businesses, we're planting this food, then we're picking it out of the soil, preparing it for these farms. We're grounding into garlic powder, garlic paste, packaging it for sale on the farm stands. And on one of my favorite days, we actually got a bunch of garlic cloves, and we went to restaurants in the harbor, and we were able to knock on some doors and talk to these restaurant owners and actually sell garlic to them, and make like very valuable connections, and see like just, I guess, how easy you can make these business connections that I would never have learned about if I wasn't outside in the classroom working with like real world businessmen and business people. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, they learned a lot about networking. We started the class off talking about networking, and they made some awesome connections themselves. You can just see the energy and authenticity and happiness there. There's just something really pure about every internship experience that I've privileged to work with and oversee. I know I can't read them all, but like there's just a few of the ones to this point in the school year we've nurtured. You can see from auto dealerships to farms to ophthalmologists to Emily. I don't know about if you want to talk about the Scituate, the one. Emily is actually in my class now. She's in the second cohort. I had blessed to have Ms. Lindblom's son in the class, and he was working for Rosen Plumbing and Heating. You could see that like the diversity. Representative Kearney's office. It's really just awesome. It's such an honor. You want to add any context as we pull to the end here?
Yeah. So I have found this class to be like the most fascinating class I've ever taken at the school. Like, I never expected learning about how to become an intern to be so like interesting and to be like so like invigorating, because oftentimes I like imagine interns as like people that are like sad because they're like not getting paid. Like that was like what I thought. But like no, it's actually so much more than that. And it's the whole experience of branching out to someone like Alex Perry at Scituate and making that connection and asking, how can I help if I can, is just so valuable. And I think that has established so much like confidence in like myself and my own social abilities that like I feel like I can take that out with me, and in college I can like get internships if I like put in the effort.
Yeah, I would say the thing I like most about this experience is, as much as an internship program, it's a mentorship, relationship program is equally, right? I break them all out in the same realm, and it's just it's really awesome. And hopefully these guys gave enough marketing pitch to all our underclassmen thinking about taking it when they're upperclassmen. So, any questions for the team? Or I know we went a little over our time, but for good cause.
No, I just think internships are so important, especially at this age where you're supposed to be making that decision of what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and it's a great opportunity for you to dabble into something that you think you're interested in, and it'll help you make that decision. Internships are great. Yeah, the shock of not learning, that you're not getting paid after that wears off. It can be really rewarding.
I mean, I think it's tremendous as these kids work towards, I mean, they're months away from graduation, right? And that scaffolding towards autonomy, you know, how do you go from being in a nice nurtured environment for 13 years, potentially in rows or pods of 4 in classrooms, to there, you know, away at school, out of state potentially. And these types of experiences stretch our kids and guide them towards that autonomy, which is it's tremendous.
I just added applause to the entire team, to Mr. Neary, the entire health and wellness team. This embracing of project-based learning and all that we do to help students have experiences and learn through those experiences is, I think, culminating, right, ultimately in graduation, going out into the world and applying those. And as an aside, if you can get me the recipe for the smoothie with the spinach, the Griffin family would appreciate it at the end of the day.
Matt, you're on that one, right? Thank you, guys.
I had a quick question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Can you just explain like the time commitment, like how, is it like once or one day a week? Is it intense for like a couple of weeks, or how do they actually access these internship opportunities?
So it's actually a block during the school day, and it abuts H block during the school day, which abuts lunch block during the school day. And so we publish monthly calendars with what I call baseline floor levels of time opportunities that I know students can commit. It typically ends up being 3 to 4 times in a week for about an hour and a half. That being said, it abuts the end of the school day. Some students had G block studies, E block studies, so now we're pairing F block, H block with G block study, right? We've got kids that don't have commitments after school. In a lot of cases, like Emily's case, I give them the editable version of our baseline calendar, and they start to identify these other windows that they can expand their opportunities. If I tell these guys once, I tell them 100 times, this is going to be as much as you make out of it. You have a chance for a 3-4 month period to get lost in this really cool opportunity. I'll never forget, I was at Driftway Auto. I was a couple years ago driving through the harbor at about 5 at night, just swung in, I saw the lights are still on, and the intern, Pino, at the time, was still there. I'm like, brother, it's 5 o'clock at night, what are you doing here? The school ended 2.5 hours ago. He's like, no, I'm all in on this. This is great. I just want to soak it all in. And I think we saw some of those things with Janice and Sons internship. I mean, it's like they just have these callings, and the way that students get placed, I really strategically force them to do some introspection and make them want it, so it's their opportunity. I don't hand them these. It has to be their experience, and because of that, they make the most out of it. So there's a lot of strategy involved in scaffolding experience, but it's awesome. Does that help with the time windows? I mean, I've had students say it was Stellwagen Bank, Marine Sanctuary, programs on the weekend. A student committed 6 hours to it, right? I set the floor of time in a given week to be equivalent of what class time would be. So typically our class 4 to 5 hours in a given week contact time. That's what I ask, that we either maximize that class time, or replicate it beyond the school day. And there's very little pushback, and kids find awesome connections to it. So.
Yeah, and if I may, I added, like, I kind of threw the triangle of trust, like, thing that we worked on for a couple of weeks, like, before we went out. So for a couple of weeks, even though I was kind of pushing Mr. Ranieri a lot to get
You were an assertive one. You were assertive.
Together, because I really wanted to start the actual internship. But we talked a lot about that trust, and from a student perspective of what our expectations are. We have our badges that I still have, and like, so there's a sign-out sheet, like, in addition to our log, and like putting in the hours and like when we're there in comparison to like our blocks and stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of checks and balances, sponsor evaluations. Yeah, I try to more than triangulate the ways to create safety nets for these kids. So it's and it's work so far so good.
My only point was going to be, it's great, and Howard said it was just this from the student's point of view in all levels, and but how appreciative and how gratifying it must be, Greg, for you and maybe all the teachers to see this program in its full force over multiple grade levels. It must be very gratifying.
It's incredible. I'm blessed. I really am. I
Very
feel very
We're
fortunate to be in the role of it.
as well.
Oh, you've been here with me since day one, Mr. Hayes, so you've seen my growth as well, so thank you.
I'd like to add something what Mr. Turner did, having the kids interview each other, because I think that's great, because they learn about a different food from their friend, they're more apt to try it rather than learning from a parent.
Thank you, guys.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next up is acceptance of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the January 27 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? Next up,
Here.
student representative report.
All right, so this week we have a lot of events happening, actually these next 2 weeks. So, what day is it? Wow, so on Wednesday, March 4th, the high school chorus will be joining the middle school chorus to have a Scituate choral night. They'll sing various pieces together.
I think for each of the choirs, I think about 1 or 2 pieces. We're going to have the after-school choirs too, so there'll be like 7 or 8 different groups performing. So it'll be a Wednesday at 7.
So yeah, that's happening at the Center for Performing Arts at high school at 7 on this Wednesday. So if you have the chance to attend, please come. It would be really cool. You get to see ranges of song difficulty and ranges of like, I don't know, music is cool. So last week on Thursday, February 27th, the Gates Middle School band students performed their recital concert, where they would perform small groups with favorite pieces like Pirates of the Caribbean and other fun stuff that they don't normally get to play in band. What did I do? I did something fun. I did that song by Daft Punk. I did that. That was fun. I enjoyed that. So yeah, that's really cool. It's still going on. And that's Friday, on March 6th, Friday, there is an art opening downtown at the Front Street Art Gallery of student artwork from the high school. And that would be super cool if people could come see that. Everyone works very hard on their artwork, and I think that everybody deserves to see what is happening physically in our art classes.
Another event that happened in this past week that we wanted to highlight was the DECA state competition. So this happened this past Thursday. There were several business class students from Scituate High School that qualified for this event with their previous DECA competition, and so they attended the state competition at the Marriott Copley in Boston. The conference was 3 days from the 27th to the 29th, and students participated in role-play business scenarios. They had to make decisions on the spot and make proposals and presentations in different fields such as business management, finance, marketing, and more. And in this competition, the students had the opportunity to advance to the next level of DECA competition, which was the International Career Development Conference. Depending on their scores, I don't have the results for how the students performed, but we can update you if we get those results. And congratulations to everybody who attended. It's a great competition, and it's amazing that they qualified for that state level. We also wanted to highlight the Patriot League Basketball Awards that happened recently. This is an annual event where there are several players that are recognized. In total, there are 24 all-star players chosen for both boys and girls basketball teams from the 2 divisions of the Patriot League. So this is from 12 different high school teams total. The coaches all meet up from the Patriot League and they bring forward a few nominations for players who have really stood out throughout the entirety of the season. And from Scituate, we have 2 girl basketball players, Jolie Rojic and Grace McNamara. And from boys basketball, Tom Connor, Nate Lopes, Keegan Sullivan, and Jack Poirier as all-star players. These players will play in a game together on March 13th with all the other players selected from the Patriot League. We also had some Scholastic Awards given to one player on our boys and girls basketball team, Lizzie Slane and Peter Shimada, and a Sportsmanship Award, one on each team, with Catherine Bernier and Harrison Mullen. So congratulations to all those players. They've had a really great season so far and continue to do so. And the last event we wanted to highlight was the Massachusetts All-State Music Festival, which will begin this Thursday, March 5th. We have 3 Scituate High School student musicians attending, and they will perform in a concert at Symphony Hall this Saturday, the 7th. For those looking to attend, we have a choir concert 1 to 1:30, jazz band 1:30 to 2, orchestra 2 to 2:30, and symphonic band 2:30 to 3. From Scituate, we have Hannah Gilmore will be in the symphonic band, Sadie Halford and Duncan McConaughey singing in the mixed choir. And we want to say congratulations to these 3 students because it's a super competitive festival to get into. They're competing with musicians from 5 different districts in Massachusetts. So after 2 rounds of auditioning, they really deserve this. And hopefully people will be able to attend this concert because it's really great music happening on Saturday.
Thank you. So the band, the All-State Music Festival at Symphony Hall?
Yes.
And do you know where the Patriot League basketball, do you know where that is?
I believe that already happened. Or there must have been another one.
Our AD is indicating it's Whitman Hanson.
Oh, Whitman Hanson. Oh, thank you. That's all, a lot of good stuff going on. Yeah, thank you.
It's up at the Symphony Hall. If you're not a member of one of the kids' families, you're not getting into Symphony Hall.
Do they give out tickets for?
Very difficult. Very difficult to walk in there.
Right. I mean, I was invited to go to one of my friend's performances at Allstate. I don't know how I was, but I was. So.
You got to know somebody.
Yeah, you got a connection.
I don't have a question on these, but I think the last time or 2 times ago you presented on the graduation party, the all-night graduation party. And I just wanted to check to make sure there's nothing we need to get approved. I guess my concern is that how is everyone getting to this party?
So what we can do is rather than have the girls try to answer that for you on the spot, we can take a look at that information and get it back to you for the March 23rd as part of our leadership report.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to be sure that we don't need any approvals
Well,
or.
historically, the kids are either dropped off or they get there. Once they're in, they're in.
Right, but-
They graduated, they're no longer students. Well, when it's here. But even in general, they're no longer students.
Just want to make sure we're covered, that's all. I don't know what the answer is, I want to make sure.
I'll make sure that we have as part of the upcoming leadership report, just some information about the all-night party and how it all is planned to work for this year.
Thank you. Next up is the leadership report.
Note of that there, I've got it for you for March 23rd. Thank you, ladies. Great job as always. So I know, again, the first part of our meeting has a lot to do with just the Scituate experience and sharing with the committee the things that are going on in the district, but I think it's invaluable to get that flavor. I will be brief. I know we've got a busy agenda. Your first item is a project that's been going on over at the Cushing School that's really neat. So back in the beginning of February, they did this project called Start With Hello, which was actually developed through the Sandy Hook Promise organization. The thrust of the project is just to help ensure that a community gets to know each other and takes those moments in the day to make those personal connections. What you see there pictured is one of several different spirit days that the Cushing Elementary School had, in which, in that case, they collected donations for community groups around Scituate. It's just a nice way, again, to bring the community together for a school that connects to our district focus on social and emotional education and helps build that sense of camaraderie and community in the school. The next item is actually really similar to what you heard earlier today about giving students these hands-on experiences to apply their knowledge. You see here a snapshot from a Hadley Elementary School project where students and staff teamed up with the village market to give our elementary kids, even as early as kindergarten, an opportunity to apply their math skills and to help see math in the day-to-day lives for kids and for families. And so it was everything from tallying up grocery costs to finding shapes for our 5-year-olds who aren't quite ready to be tallying up full costs just yet. But it just gives kids an opportunity to connect with the math that they're doing in the class in a real-world setting. So we thank our colleagues over at Village Market for supporting our work there. The next is an interesting little component of the PBIS program over at the Jenkins Elementary School. What you see there is the golden table, and it's designed to help students reinforce expectations in our schools. So when we catch students doing good things in school, they have an opportunity to be recognized with this really special lunch that the Jenkins staff puts on for them in a little corner of our elementary school cafeteria. Lastly, you may or may not have seen the bobcat buzzing around Wampatuck Elementary School over the past couple of weeks. A little bit of context for it. So, 4 or 5 months ago now, we had some concerns that were brought up about the section of the ECC playground that has the swings on it, essentially. And the ECC playground is designed to really meet the needs of our youngest learners. So the playground equipment's got to be specialized. And some of the equipment had just broken down over time. So a group of community members got together, Ms. Mullen, myself, leaders from the ECC, as well as Ms. Whitney, the principal. They started having conversations about how we can find resources and funds to be able to replace some of this equipment. So what you see there is phase 1. That's essentially some donations that have come in, along with some grant funding to replace some of the basic equipment. And then in phase 2 and 3, we're going to add this to our multi-year facilities plan, capital plan for the school district. Obviously, the committee already approved that plan, in October, a few months ago. So you see that going out into FY22 and beyond. But we're happy to see the new equipment in there and that students are being able to use it where we have some unseasonably warm weather this February. No major legislative or DESE updates other than the SOA guidance that you'll see later today and the SOA plan for April. I do want to take a moment to add a component to the leadership report that I think is apropos. So given the heightened global media coverage of coronavirus, now named COVID-19, Scituate Public Schools will be sending out some proactive information for families, actually in about 20 minutes or so, in a school messenger email that will go out to all families. It'll include everything you see here, and I'll give you a quick walkthrough of it in a moment. The intention of the communication, though, is purely just to keep families informed about what the virus is, what it isn't, and the kinds of things that schools, districts like Scituate and others are doing to make sure that kids and staff are safe. There's going to be 3 things that I think are important to highlight for the committee and then obviously for the community as well. The first is that you should know that Scituate Public Schools, since really this outbreak occurred in China, has been monitoring the situation with information from the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, as well as local officials as well. We keep regular tabs on all guidance and all advisories that come in regarding the virus and keep those up to date with all of our health team and our school leaders. The second to note is that we've already been taking some proactive measures with the guidance, obviously, of the Mass Department of Public Health. We were just on a conference call with them at 1 this afternoon. So we've put together some response protocols in the unlikely event that we ever had someone who presented with a history, like a travel history, that connects to that virus and or some symptoms that connect to it. We're also working with local districts in the region to just keep abreast of any other notifications that occur here in the region and to coordinate efforts as needed going forward. The last, I think, is important to underscore. This is something that we hear a lot when we talk with our colleagues at Mass Department of Public Health, is that the risk for COVID-19 in Massachusetts is currently quite low, but the risk for influenza is still very high this time of year. And what they keep asking us to underscore with our communities is that some of the same preventative measures that a kid or a family member or a staff member would take to keep you healthy from the flu, you do the same thing for COVID-19. So, for example, washing your hands with soap and water, avoiding touching eyes, nose, and mouth, and covering your cough, and of course, stay away from people who are sick. And if you're sick, stay home. Right? That's for staff. That's for students as well. What you see at the bottom there is a link that the Department of Public Health keeps regularly updating by the hour with any new information from World Health Organization, from CDC. We include that in a letter that goes out to families in about 20 minutes, along with this really great fact sheet that our nurse leader, Ms. Roach, was able to get together for us. So the intention of it is just to give information for families, help them understand the actions that we're currently taking to make sure that we have plans in place to react if necessary, but also to remind people that some of the same common sense actions that you take to prevent the flu, you can take to prevent things like COVID-19. The last thing I share that's really specific to the committee is just the information regarding out-of-country and out-of-state field trips. And you can see the list there in your backup as well. Again, over the past month, we've been monitoring all of the CDC recommendations and travel guidance for all of those locations. I continue on the next page, sorry. For all of those locations. At this time, there's no guidance that requests that we not have students attend these locations. But of course, if the committee ever wants to revisit the conversation or some of the votes that you've had previously on these locations, we certainly can. We've also put a mechanism in place to ensure that our nurse leader, along with our school leaders, and any of the coordinators of these trips are in constant contact and monitoring with each other and monitoring any of the information coming in, again, through those national, state, and local organizations. So those are important information. Answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ron. I'm extremely concerned regarding out-of-state, out-of-country field trips. I mean, you say the district is monitoring, but that's the school committee's decision. The school committee authorizes that. And it would be up to the school committee to make a decision if they want to change any of those authorizations. And we have Quebec coming up this weekend. What do we know about the virus in the Quebec area?
So it's a really great point. I want to couch my original statement just by saying some of these you've already approved, and so because you approved them, we just start monitoring them anyway. Some are coming down the pike, so you can see like April of 2021. Obviously, that hasn't come in front of the committee yet, and we still monitor anyway, so we can give you the most up-to-date information. We've just done some research on all of these. We do them on almost a daily basis now at this point. There's currently no health warnings with level 1 of the CDC for Quebec. It's level 1 for all of these countries at this time anyway. But we're checking Quebec daily, and we're checking Canada daily to make sure that there's no change in that status as of this afternoon, whenever it was, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it's been level 1 for CDC.
I'm especially concerned about the Disney trips. And the reason I'm concerned is that the patrons of Disney World is historically an international clients or patrons. So I think we need to monitor, and we need to, the first trip's what, 6 weeks away, I think. We need to monitor that very closely, and I think it needs to be an ongoing committee agenda to monitor that, because I am quite concerned about our kids going to Disney World this spring. I mean, more than a little concerned.
Yeah. Just for some guidance from the committee, how would you like to put that as an agenda? Do you want to do like a report out? Do you want to just give me a little bit of guidance on what you'd like to see there?
Well, I think certainly reports at each meeting, but and I'm not trying to be alarmist, but I'm just trying to be.
Well, I mean, it doesn't.
And I don't know whether we want to have that discussion now or at our next meeting, whether we're going to send a ton of kids to Disney World in a month and a half. I mean, it is 6 Washington. And it's extremely concerning. And I know our intern at my law office left about 3 weeks ago for his semester in Italy. He's arriving back tonight. Everyone was sent home from Italy today. And he's going to be quarantined as soon as he gets home. And so it's a real threat to our kids. I would hate to be part of it, anything that would jeopardize the health and safety of our kids.
Yuri, that's why I wanted to put it on the committee's agenda in general, just by starting the conversation here as part of the leadership report.
But I guess I'd like to see something specifically regarding Disney at our next meeting, so that we can make some kind of decision.
So wait a minute, it's in Florida, with the 2 cases that we reported today.
Yeah. So, and there's people from all over the world are in Disney every day.
You have to let parents know, because we made our final payment to Disney.
Can't hear you.
You'll have to let parents know that you're thinking of this decision, because we've made our final
Well,
payment.
that's what I'm doing right now.
That's another consideration of, as I had asked, is there travel insurance that people purchase that, what decisions are airlines making if people change plans, all that information.
And so I'll give you a little bit of context to let you know that we've already been looking at some of those things. Airlines in general, unless there's a travel restriction in some way, have been hesitant to make any kinds of reimbursements. And so there's a little bit of that sort of economic tension, I think, on the situation as well. And that's broadly, right, back to any state in the union or international or what have you. And so that's why we've been so keen on doing the regular monitoring of the CDC health travel restrictions as well, because that's ultimately what airlines would be looking at too, and travel companies and organizations, etc. That becomes the de facto expert guidance, if you will, that all organizations would lean on in those cases.
Well, and by our next meeting, that could all, they will have a whole policy in place, so.
Right.
It does change regularly, just to give you some flavor. Countries change categories, level 1, level 2, level 3 regularly, depending on any number of factors. So just so I'm clear on some next steps, right, we'll have a report out at the next meeting, just on more information about all these already. And then if the committee is looking to make an adjustment or a change to a vote, what we'll do is we'll make sure we come prepared with just the ripple effect. So if we ultimately voted to say, like, we're not going to send students out of state for these reasons, then our plan B for those kiddos and families would be X, Y, and Z. We'll talk about that as well, so we can make informed decisions.
And if we have all that information at the next meeting, and then, reach out to the families that might be affected. So, either be discussed at that meeting or, if need be, have a special meeting for
And I just want to underscore, for example, our France trip as another example there. We've been in regular contact with our families as well. The teacher that's coordinating is in regular contact because there's so many questions right now, right? So we do try to make sure the families are informed, but I want to underscore that this situation is an international situation that is fluid and is changing and is a little bit outside of our locus of control, certainly in terms of expertise. So we really do lean on our state and national experts around what their recommendations are, and those are things that currently we've been following. We'll certainly bring more of that to the committee for our next meeting.
But, again, and the bottom line is, it's the school committee's responsibility to make a decision whether we sponsor our children going places on official business. And I'd rather err on the side of caution. I remember after 9/11, when there were various trips planned, and we were a little more cautious than others as far as those types of trips are concerned. I remember some of our trips were changed and locations changed. This is a real threat to us all. They closed the Louvre this weekend because the people who work there refused to go to work. because they were concerned about their health. And so I'm hopefully the threat will diminish over time. But I am deeply concerned about the Disney trips and friends. And people can make up their own mind, but if it's a school-sponsored event, I'm going to have my opinion in my vote. So.
I think the other concern as well is just the staff. If there are 5 teachers, and within a blue, if there are 5 teachers doing the Quebec trip or the Disney trip, and they say, well, we don't want to do it anymore, and obviously we don't want to put that in risk either.
Can hear you.
So I think we need to make sure that we, I said that we also need to be concerned about our staff. Because if they decide they don't want to go to any of these trips, we do need to make sure that we take care of their safety as well, and make sure that if there's a change in any of these countries or states, I mean, I think to Mike's point, you said you're reviewing this daily. We should probably, the school committee should probably get something anytime there's a change. So if Florida goes from level 1 to level 2 or whatever it is, just to make sure we're aware, so that we're not waiting for another meeting. We don't meet again for 3 weeks. So if we need to hold a special meeting to say, look, this is a concern, we're letting our parents know as soon as we can, and then also making a decision without waiting till the last minute.
Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Next up on the agenda is the acceptance of gift. Link.
You have in your backup the letter of acceptance. And again, my apologies, Ms. Mullen, sick today as well. And so as part of this work with ECC, the family was kind enough to gift us $5,000. And that donation, along with the grant donation, was combined to do some of the revitalization efforts at the ECC playground. So what you see in your packet is a thank you letter from the Special Education Department to Mr. and Mrs. Link on behalf of the school district.
Move to accept with great appreciation the donation from the Link family to the ECC.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Link. Okay, on to new business, statement of interests for Cushing and Havel.
Thank you. So what you see in your backup is 2 items. One is a summary item, and the second is formal vote language from MSBA. I'll take just a minute or 2 to give you a refresh the framework on this. Again, Cushing Hadley schools have served generations of students and families in our community for well over a half century. However, over time, the facility needs have increased from roofs to windows to parking lots, significant facilities needs. They're well-maintained facilities, and again, kudos to Bob Dillon, to Mr. Donald, and all of our operations staff for the work they do in the buildings. Thank you to the school committee and the community for continuing to invest in our facilities and capital plan and our multi-year planning there. But the bottom line is simply that it's time to have a new facility here in the Scituate schools. Our SOIs that you see in front of you are twofold. There's one for the Cushing and there's one for the Hadley. The proposal is the same that we talked about last year, that we pursue a more comprehensive solution to solving the facilities needs for those buildings. And rather than doing a patchwork series of repairs, that we go forward with these SOIs to the MSBA and request that we do a consolidation where we ultimately build a new elementary school that would replace both the Cushing and the Hadley schools. What you have in front of you here is just a brief summary. I tried to kind of give you some context from back in November of 2017 when we did that comprehensive evaluation of some of our oldest schools, all the way through to submitting SOIs last year, going to the senior study phase, which was essentially the finalist phase of the process, but unfortunately not having our proposal be selected as the most need, the most urgent by the MSBA. So the SOIs that we would propose to submit this round would be very much identical to the existing SOIs, simply updated by the year, and any changes that have been done, small-scale changes, repairs that have been done. If you look at the last few bullets that you see here, February of 2020, Scituate Public Schools begins working on that statement of interest. We have that. March, it would be the school committee and the Board of Selectmen would vote to move forward and submit that statement of interest. That's what we're here doing today. In April, if approved by both public bodies, then we would submit those SOIs on behalf of our community. In summer of this upcoming year, you'd be notified if you were accepted to be part of the senior study process, just as you were this past summer. Fall, senior study if needed. In December of 2020, if you're selected, you'd be notified for your selection for FY 2022. So very much the same process that you saw last year, and I'm just going to continue to work at it and continue to push the MSBA for those funds.
No one said it was going to be easy, Ron.
We were really hopeful when we got the senior study. I won't lie to you, I was really excited about that. And kudos again to our school teams, both the Cushing and the Hadley. Ms. Moffett, Ms. McKillop did brilliant work just sharing what good work that our staff are already doing at those buildings, making do with a configuration that doesn't necessarily support our vision for project-based learning and still delivering project-based learning to kids, but helping illustrate to the MSBA our need. As I think I mentioned to the committee a couple weeks ago, it really is needs-based. And so when, for example, we had the Gates SOI that went through, it's a building that's 100 years old. There are just some buildings that are 100 years old out there right now that have more need than we currently do. That said, I'm confident we've got a strong SOI, a strong application. I think we've got a strong vision in terms of the educational needs that we want our facility to deliver on. We just have to continue and be persistent with it.
And nobody could have worked harder than you and your team and everybody on the committee and everywhere else that worked on this. It's just
We weren't the most urgent this time.
sometimes stuff happens, and it's not related to anything that we did or the need we have. Instead, other people had bigger needs than us.
I would say kudos to Paul and his team as well. I mean, they went through the buildings again, like this year, just took a look. Is there anything that's changed? Has there been any additional repairs that were needed from last year to this year? So that we can just update the SOI to be as persuasive and powerful as possible.
So this is two motions.
One more question.
Oh.
Did we, for the most part, did we just resubmit same language? Did we change or enhance any language that we were using?
As I mentioned, we haven't submitted anything yet. We need approval by the school committee and the board of selectmen to submit anything.
Correct.
But the submittal will still be priority 5-7. And as I mentioned just a second ago, Mr. Dahl and his team go through the buildings per our facilities and capital plan, identify any of the additional repairs that we might have made, so that we give them the most up-to-date information that reflects the conditions on the ground, the conditions in the building. But the core of the request is identical.
And was there any feedback from the MSBA in terms of our initial submission of, well, this was missing, or this should have been a little cleaner, or you should focus on another priority that might change your submission in any way?
I asked that in every possible way you could ask that, and their response remains the same. It's just that the fact that you made it to the senior study demonstrates you have a strong application. The fact that you didn't get it demonstrates there's just more urgent need that's out there. Because again, if there's a way to make our application better, we want to do that and go back to it. All the input we got was, you've got a strong application, your building's older and in need, but not in the most urgent need in the Commonwealth.
Start. What? I think we have to read the whole thing.
I'm sorry you do. Yeah, there's two full paragraphs of motion that we're requesting.
I'll take the first one. If you can't do
What
it.
about the loud voice? You can hear outdoor voice.
Hi, so I move, having convened in an open meeting on March 2nd, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of Scituate, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form to be dated April 3rd, 2020, for the Cushing Elementary School located at 1 Aberdeen Drive, Scituate, Mass. 02066, which includes the potential consolidation of elementary schools and construction of a new elementary school, and describes and explains the following deficiencies and priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems. And priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and local and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest forms, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I so move, having convened in an open meeting on March 2nd, 2020, prior to the SOI submission of the closing date, the school committee of Scituate, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form to be dated April 3rd, 2020. The Hatherley Elementary School, located at 72 Ann Vinyl Road, Scituate, Mass. 02066, which includes the potential consolidation of elementary schools and construction of a new elementary school. It describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems. And priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your support. We'll be at the Board of Selectmen, I want to say next week, and we'll assume their support there as well. We'll be submitting on or around April 3rd.
Next on the agenda
That was working on
is the 2020-2021 school calendar survey review and calendar option.
What's up for you? So as we talked about, a month ago now, Labor Day falls on an unusual date this year, late in the year on the 7th. And so last month we talked about getting some input around two scenarios, right? Starting before Labor Day, starting after Labor Day. The committee had some discussion about what that would look like and would entail. So you see a couple of things here in front of you. The first is just the response to the survey that we sent out, the 14th or 15th there. Went out for a couple of weeks to the community. About 1,300 people responded or so, and 53% to 47%. I want to acknowledge there were some questions about the settings on that survey. So the default setting is that someone could vote more than once and take a survey more than once, which I suppose if you wanted to, you certainly could. That was brought to the attention of the district. We changed the default setting to ensure that you can only vote one time. And that was done, 15th, 16th, so right that weekend it was brought to our attention and we adjusted it there. But I want to acknowledge that as well, that had come up as part of the survey.
Do you know how many votes we had prior to making the change?
I don't know that. It was within the first 48 hours that it was out. I don't know the exact number. The other item that I think is maybe even more important than this, because it's unusual and a little bit new, that I want to bring to the committee's attention. So obviously tomorrow is Super Tuesday, and next year you've got the presidential election. Typically what we do is you schedule PD days on like primary days, election days. That's been historically what you do. Given the heightened engagement in this national conversation, we may recommend not having school on that day at all. And that's purely for parking here at this combined campus. A little bit of data, I reached out to the town on this just to better inform myself about it. So in 2016, you had about 80% of your voters voted, about 12,000 votes, 8,000 showed up the day of, 4,000 are voting. 2020, you already have an increase in overall registered voters in town, and it's projected to have a greater turnout, obviously, because more people, more turnout. So with that in mind, we'd also recommend another adjustment to our typical calendar. That is, you pick a fall PD day to be determined with Ms. Arnold's team and the Professional Development Council, and then you have November 3rd, no school, no PD at all. It would mean moving your end day out a day, obviously, but in reading the data that you're looking at for voter turnout, that may be beneficial to ensure that you just have room for everybody on campus on that day. That said, a couple other items that are important to keep in the back of your mind, regardless of what you choose for before Labor Day, after Labor Day, Election Day, or otherwise. November 25th, half day prior to Thanksgiving, we typically do that. You see your December break, your February break, a March PD day, and your April break. We're working on the heat patiently.
Is that in the SOI?
The heat?
Oh, I'm not doing this building.
Not yet. 6-7 more years, this one will be on your radar.
Let me try this.
The results were interesting for the survey. I thought it'd be probably 50, 50, more than 50-50 then.
It's pretty close. Do you want some guidance on this, Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. That would be helpful. So what I'd love to try to do on the 23rd would be to give you a calendar to vote on. And so if there's any guidance that you'd like to offer us, we'd be able to prepare one for you. Otherwise, what we'd have to do is prepare 2 calendars with variations, and you could vote on them that way.
Well, I can be very quick and simple. I mean, I think obviously we should not have school on election day. I think that's a no-brainer. We've done it a lot. We've done it before.
I have a question on that. I know there's been a lot of focus on PD with last year's calendar and early release and so on. Obviously, the voting only happens at the high school. I'm assuming that most of our full-day PDs are all held at the high school. Is there any benefit to not doing that and go back to the old model and having it at the elementary schools? I'm sure it won't work, but I just want to ask the question.
Sure. So it really depends on the structure of the PD, right? So this year what we did is we decided that we do a focus on one district-wide focus, which was social emotional development. So that meant we wanted to meet all together in one place. But if you were to have it more differentiated so that you could meet like at the elementary level, middle school level, high school level, or as school specific, you could do that. But the only other large school is Jenkins. And we've done that in the past there. I would suggest, the parking is a good idea. And I would suggest just not doing it. And the reason why is because we just went through this huge parking plan, transportation plan for next week, or for tomorrow rather, because of the primary and the parking, the town advising us that we can't use the back parking lot. So, Paul's team, Andrea, Erica, have done a great job in coordinating all that transportation. We designated all the correct parking spaces that we could use. But I just don't see how we could do that if Jenkins is the next largest.
Right, but more than that, you wouldn't have everyone go to Jenkins. Maybe you could split the staff up into 2 or 3 different groups. You could use 3 elementary schools.
Right, but that's the thing is how do we determine that?
Correct.
We haven't made up our PD plan for next year.
Maybe we should come up with a PD plan to see if that's an opportunity.
Exactly.
Just a thought.
Yeah, we are considering.
Okay.
So having no school on election day and then having another no school day, PD day, that automatically would.
Bumps you out one day.
Well,
for your
2
NA.
days. According,
It'd be one additional day, right? Because
so
you
the
didn't have that
option,
PD day.
if you started after Labor Day, it says the last day would be June 22nd. And then, so now, why would it then go to June 24th?
Well, the PD day is already counted, right? So that in that calculation, a PD day is counted. You'd still have the PD day in the calculation. It would just mean you'd have one additional day.
So it would be June 23rd.
Yeah. And if I could just add maybe 30 more seconds on this, not to belabor like this conversation. While I appreciate it's inconvenient for us, I think it's a mark of a good democracy that people are engaged. And I would add that serendipitously, it gives students an opportunity, especially our middle and high school students, to engage with the election process in some ways. Go vote with mom or dad, be a participant here at the high school and setting things up. So inconvenient as it may be, I think that those are unintended benefits.
I'm inclined to, for just next year, start before Monday. Because if starting after doesn't give us a lot of leeway.
I've never been in favor of starting before Labor Day, and I'm still not. I mean, I've had this discussion for 36 years, and I have yet to find a good reason to start for Labor Day. And I mean, you know, every, 7 years, we're going to be late. We're going to have a late start, and nobody died, no children were traumatized. So I'd have to be convinced that it's worthwhile even discussing. I mean, that's the way we do things here, and that's the way it's been. And,
I think this year, this coming year, is particularly.
yeah, I know, but we've had a September 8th start before, and everybody survived. That's my view.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm in the middle. So again, if we start before, the student's perspective only, it's Wednesday and Thursday. It's Wednesday, Thursday, 2 days, correct? Wednesday, Thursday, students. I think this is kind of a crazy question, but I guess I ask crazy questions every once in a while. I think let's look at the status of the schools. Like, what's the temperature? Is it going to be warmer on average at the beginning of the first week in September, or is it going to be warmer at the end of June? We don't want the kids. I mean, we don't know what the temperature's going to be. We have to look at averages. It's silly, but it's one of the things that might help us. I don't know. Like, if the average temperature is 92 degrees the first week in September, maybe we don't want to do it. And if the average temperature at the end of June is, it's one other piece of data. That's all. I don't think it's going to necessarily impact, but I think we need to think about that.
Global warming, I think you can assume they're both going to be up.
Yeah.
True. I just think it's important because that's part of the discussion. I mean, the staff and the kids are going to be in school in these days, and we can't obviously predict what it's going to be. But
And then there was the one year in June, and we had to make the last days half days because it was so hot.
Yeah, so it could happen before.
I mean, I think we all knew this was not going to be easy decision. Half the people are going to be happy with it, and half are not. So it is what it will be.
The leadership team has no recommendations about the Labor Day, but I appreciate the guidance on the election day. It would be our recommendation to have that off, and that's safe for kids and for staff, so I thank you for that guidance. I think what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you'd like to see 2 calendars on the 23rd?
I think, yeah.
Got it.
Moving on. Next up on the agenda is the Student Opportunity Act.
I apologize. So what you have in front of you are just 2 things. My screen is a little wonky there. The first is, as we talked about in February, the state has finally put some guidance forward, DESE has finally put some guidance forward on the Student Opportunity Act plan. Student Opportunity Act has provisions that require school districts in the Commonwealth to submit a plan to the commissioner that essentially outlines how we use funds to close the achievement gap. The achievement gap is to be determined by each school district. One of the things that I wanted to underscore, the Department of Education has been trying to provide guidance to all districts to have continuity, but still honor that school districts like Scituate have a strategic plan, have measures for student success, and others may have less of that information or less of that guidance in their documentation. So DESE put out some guiding information for us just a few weeks ago, and what I have for you here, make sure this is more cleanly, is a draft of that plan. My ask of the committee would be that we're voting on this for March 23rd. But what I want to do today in the next few minutes is just give you an overview of what that plan is and then open it up to any questions that you may have. DESE outlines a few commitments that they want each school district to comment on that are reflected in the Student Opportunity Act that was passed by the Commonwealth just a few weeks ago. The first commitment is focusing on student subgroups. They asked, well, okay, you're getting resources from the state. What student subgroups would you want to use these resources for? Here in Scituate, the top need in terms of student subgroups would be students with disabilities. And so we identified that as the focal point of the resources and the focal point of the plan. It's also important to note that this entire SOA plan is connected directly to our district's 5-year strategic plan. So in our strategic plan, we talk about how we close the achievement gap for students with disabilities, we meet the needs of all kids, and so we thought it'd be appropriate and apropos for this plan to do the same. Commitment 2, they ask, okay, what kinds of things are you investing in, either currently, continuing, or plan to invest in the future over the next few years that will help close that gap, that will help better support students with disabilities and ultimately support all students. There's a few elements that our team has identified. The first is the standards-based, comprehensive math materials that we talked about as part of the budget process for all elementary schools. Right now, our teachers do incredible work teaching our elementary kiddos maths, and they're all using different materials. And so it creates some continuity challenges for kids and for staff and for families. And bringing in these unified materials, being standards-based as they are, really helps all kids access math instruction more easily and with more equity across the board. The second is simply continuing our investment in co-teaching. We want to try to make sure that all students with disabilities are taught in the least restrictive environment possible and taught with their peers whenever possible. Again, I know we've talked a lot about this through the budget process over the past few weeks and months. It's something that our school district is already invested in, and this plan simply reaffirms our commitment to that. Again, connected directly to our strategic plan as well. And the last, again, something connected to our strategic plan and to our budget process, is expanding the SBS therapeutic program that supports students with social and emotional needs. So while the math materials is for all students, co-teaching for all students with disabilities, expanding this therapeutic is for our students with the most significant disabilities. We currently have this therapeutic program, the GEMS program at Jenkins Elementary School, and we don't yet have it at the middle school as students get older. As we talked about as part of the budget process, we think this is a top priority for the school district. It ensures that students with the most significant social and emotional needs are provided the services that they need with their peers in their community, and we can continue to educate them, in this case at the Gates Middle School here in Scituate. All 3 of these are already part of our budget process. Again, I want to underscore all 3 of these are already part of our strategic plan. This request by DESE is, in some small ways, really a bureaucratic exercise to ensure that districts have a plan to close those achievement gaps, that school districts have a strategic plan in general, and that they're connecting that strategic plan to their budgeting process. Third commitment is simply how will you measure how students are doing. And again, as part of our strategic plan process, I don't mean to sound like a broken record there, but everything we do should connect to that. We've identified 8 measures of student success, and we've pulled 3 of them specific for this request by DESE. That's the math achievement growth, student disabilities versus the aggregate, it's math growth data. Again, student disabilities versus aggregate. and it's our peer data, which is our social emotional data. And we can actually disaggregate that by students' disabilities versus the aggregate. What's, I think, important for you to keep in mind here is these are not new measures to our school district. We're not adding new layers. We're not adding new to-dos or adding new initiatives to our staff and our school community. We're simply utilizing the good initiatives we already have and the good data set that we already have and focusing in on something Desi's requested of us. Commitment 4 is engaging all families. And we sat down early last week, with a few community members, again, specific to special education groups in general, and asked for their input about ways in which we can better engage community members and better engage families. Our schools do a lot of that work already through different events, teacher conferences, through a lot of their school councils. We wanted to get more input from community members about other ways we can expand and improve on that, and how we can do that with a focus towards students with disabilities and families of students with disabilities. You can see the list there. I won't read them all to you, but I want to underscore the very top and bottom bullets because I think they're probably the most powerful of the group. First is this program called the Bridge the Gap program. If you're not familiar with it, it's incredible. It happens over at the Hadley Elementary School right now, and it's essentially a program in which families of students with significant disabilities are able to take some time to sit down with each other, with some of our staff, and just have honest conversations about what it means to be a family of a student with a significant disability. We don't have that in every school, and we could, and we should. Whether your child has a significant disability or maybe something less significant, it may look and feel different being a family working through their child's needs. And so giving families those touch points, those connections, those opportunities to build connections with like-minded families and families going through some of the same challenges that they and their children are, we thought was a home run in terms of improving that connection and engagement, and certainly something we can do going forward. And the other is our school council. That's the mechanism through which schools grow and improve anyway. Many of you are on the school councils already. But to ensure that we have at least one parent of a student with disabilities on all of our school councils. In some cases we do, but in some cases we don't. By no fault of anyone, it's simply that school council is going to be so big and you don't ask every single group to be represented. We thought given that students with disabilities have significant needs and that it's our focus to close that achievement gap, we thought that having that voice in every school council going forward would be really helpful. So that's our plan as you see it. I'll certainly answer any questions that you might have. Try to fix this setting.
I know I missed the last 4 months. This is one of the reasons I did. I mean, I am really impressed with this this plan of this platform, filling out this platform, and what we're planning on doing going forward. Because you know, as far as what level school system are we? I mean, we know where our problems lie, and this will hopefully address a lot of that. And it's a group that we need to do better, obviously. So I'm very grateful about this, with especially the math-based curriculum change in the elementary and co-teaching, and all of it really, in the trying to expand the therapeutic programs through the middle school. All desperately needed, and the fact that we can do something about it within our budget, I think is very important and something to be very proud of. I did have one question. On the, let me find it. Excuse me. Trying to measure the success of home visits. Where is it? Measuring the, we will measure the engagement of families who receive a home visit through follow-up surveys. Can you explain the home visit situation to me?
Yeah, we actually do some home visits now. And one of the things that our team was talking about that we can do more is to get that check-in afterwards. Was this helpful? Is it effective? How's it going? Like that follow-up on the impact. And if I can just add one other item you see over the shoulder, One of the things that I think we need to continue to work on is checking our actions against the impact on kids, right? And so you see commitment 1, 2, and 4 are things that we can do. They're important things, they're good things. And school districts are always thinking about, like, what can we do to help kids better? How can we better improve our programming? But making sure that we're checking, are those things having the intended impact is just as important. So be it a survey from a home visit, or asking the question, year out, 6 months out, are these things we're doing, adding the maths program, expanding therapeutic programs, and so on, are they demonstrating a measurable impact on kids? And not just on standardized tests like MCAS, but also in this case for their social emotional well-being. We have the tools to measure that. We just have to make sure that we're connecting and asking those questions. Is what we're doing effective? And if so, can we improve it? And if not, time out, let's reevaluate and adjust.
Yeah, I guess I was curious as to what the home visits were for. Would it be with a kid who's challenged and to see what his or her setup might be at home and how they're adapting to their disability at home, and whether we can incorporate some of that into what we do in school, or is it something different?
Yes to that, and sometimes more as well. Sometimes all of that, and we sometimes partner with outside organizations as well to provide services, wraparound services to families, and we'll work with them to connect with home to, an example, like to take a behavior system that we're using here in school that's working really well and help a family implement it at home or use the same language at home, and vice versa. Something that's working really well at home, we'll go look at that with our team and say, oh, this is working well at home, we can take these elements and implement them as part of a student plan here. But again, one of the things that we can do more of that you see in this plan is that check back. How did this go for you? Did that work well for you? Can we do something differently? We don't have that feedback loop, or we'd like to, and we should.
No, that's great, thank you.
Is it a Scituate staff member that usually does the home visit, or is?
It is not always, but it is sometimes a Scituate staff member, and it's never one Scituate staff member. It's usually 2 Scituate staff members, or a Scituate staff member and an outside provider staff member together.
I think just to, again, I echo what Mike said. I think this sounds great. It is addressing some significant needs in the district. But the home survey, I think that the item is more about the home survey. But if a child's receiving services, it's on their IEP. This is more of a check-in to make sure that, well, I guess it should be kind of a self-check-in because they're meeting their goals, but this is kind of an addition to that to make sure that everything is working well and potentially.
And it's really focused on the home visit itself. Like, did that meet its goal?
Right.
How is that going, right? More so than like, what's this kid's B grade? How's it going on B grade and C grade necessarily?
Okay. And just one question on the commitment 3, the metrics. You're focusing on math and pair data. How come not in ELA or science? Just identifying them.
We do collect the data and use that as a measure of student success in general for all of the actions in our strategic plan. But as part of this specific request by DESE, we're trying to connect our actions and measurable outcomes. So because, for example, all the good work that Ms. Elich and Ms. Arnold have done developing this implementation for the elementary maths program, we want to measure maths.
Okay, got it.
Go back to the home visit. Is there a reason why there's not 2? I mean, just like 1, the initial one, and then like a follow-up one?
There sometimes is.
Okay.
We may be going a little deep on home visits.
Right.
I would just say that it's
the way it's presented makes it sound like, oh, you do a home visit and then that was it.
and let me clarify, and I can offer better language that may be helpful for it. After a home visit, we don't send a survey. How did that go? And we'd like to. But in some cases, we visit regularly. In other cases, it's a one-time to set something up. In either way, we should do that check-in about how that experience was. That's the sentiment there, and I can adjust the language to reflect that better.
Nope, no second.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you. Next up is the annual school choice designation for SES.
You see a pretty simple memo for you. School choice program allows families to send children to schools and communities other than their town. That's a tuition program. School choice is a program that's long-standing in Massachusetts. Historically, Scituate doesn't participate in school choice in this version, I want to underscore this version because we are one of only 33 school districts in the Commonwealth that do participate in the medical program, which is a different version of choice. It's the recommendation of our team that Scituate includes opt out of the school choice program and it requires an annual vote.
Is there any, what is the downside of having, being part of school choice?
The downside for us,
Yeah, for the school.
well, it's really based on space. And so typically, if you're running school choice, you'd build plans and programming to enroll in your early grades. And given our conversations we've recently had about enrollment size and class size in elementary schools, we just wouldn't have space to do it. Could you enroll in later grades? Yes. As someone with experience with choice programs, you typically don't enroll in later grades. That's the only downside for us. I would say regionally, it can potentially draw students from other school districts and create unnecessary tension between school districts that are otherwise partner with each other. So for example, Cape Cod wrestles with this right now. Every school district in Cape Cod is school choice. And so rather than sharing ideas and programs with each other, that can sometimes quiet those conversations. Because if I share this really cool thing with your school district, now kids may leave my school district, like that dynamic can exist.
I'll make a motion that the Scituate Public Schools do not participate in the school choice programs for the upcoming year.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now is the first opportunity for comments, statements, questions from the public.
Liz O'Reilly. I just wanted to address, and I know I had sent you guys an email and Ron addressed it, but I really think in looking at the numbers for the links to the calendar, you have to realize that for 2 days, people voted numerous times. So the numbers, in fact, the first clue should have been 1,300. I've been in the district 35 years. That was probably the biggest response to any survey. But, you know, the outcome may be the same, but I think that it needs to be said that the data might be a little skewed, that it might not, because I do know people that answered it multiple times.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Milena Davidova. I live on 142 Country Way. Mr. Griffin, I have a question for you about the coronavirus preparation. I know that with the snow days, the school district was considering maybe some sort of like study packages for students. So I was wondering if in the weirdest situation of shutting down the district, keeping the kids at home, can they do work either with computers or will they be given packages to take home?
Sure. But thanks for your question. I appreciate everybody's just thoughtful and considerate, deep conversation about all the different possibilities that could occur. Unfortunately, things like blizzard bags is something that the state is no longer supported. We're a little bit disappointed in that because we thought, coronavirus aside, just as a community on the ocean that gets impacted by weather regularly, that'd be a really helpful, creative, sort of out-of-the-box way to ensure that kids are getting education if you're in a nor'easter for a few days or those sorts of things. The state had a number of districts that were already doing that work, and they looked really different in situation to situation, so they put a pause on it statewide, so that wouldn't be a tool in our toolbox. We wouldn't be able to do some kind of remote learning if, in fact, a district had to close.
Okay. Desi kind of took that out, that choice out of our hands.
Yeah. It's a good idea, but I expect there'll be more conversation in the coming years, but not at this time.
I'm just going to sneak up front so you can see me. I'll be real brief. I see you've got a busy agenda. Bill McClellan, 423 Tilden Road. The reason I'm here, my concern is the district has potential problems with the policies and procedures with regards to background checks. My own personal experience was I found my child was due to be transported by someone with what appeared to be an apparent questionable history for a driver. I questioned it. The driver was removed. Professionally, I work in regulatory compliance. I've got 15 years of experience in background checks. My impression was that the time and manner in which the district responded to my concern indicated that there was a pretty good chance that a query check wasn't run prior to my inquiry. That's my opinion. So, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns?
Hi, my name is Molly, and I live in Berkshire Road. I just had a quick question with regards to the start time for Labor Day. You mentioned that it would be Wednesday and Thursday. I get they give the Friday for the long weekend. I'm just wondering why it wouldn't have incorporated the Tuesday that week. Is there a law, like is there a reason why?
PD for the teachers.
Right, so you have an issue with the teacher contract because they can't start a week before Labor Day, right? Okay. My other, I guess, comment is, and I might be in the minority, with regards to starting before Labor Day. You know, I know that every 7 years we've never had kids harmed, and I get that. But when we're talking about maximizing student learning and on-time learning for students, I just think that having kids on the 180th day is not as productive as the excitement that goes along at the beginning of the school year. I also think that there's a lot of beginning work that starts at the beginning of any school year, and I think teachers, you know, if they have those 2 days prior to Labor Day, they can hit the ground running that Tuesday after Labor Day. So as far as maximizing student learning, I think that should be a consideration that you think about.
Thank you. All right, moving on to old business, kindergarten enrollment.
Very good. First, I want to thank our elementary leaders here. They've been patient through our meeting. I asked them to come as well to share any further information or answer any questions that the committee may have. As a reminder, we talked about this at our last meeting. Our kindergarten enrollment process continues. We're probably 90% through the enrollment process at this moment in the year. You've got a full background in your memo here. The item that I want to bring to your attention and requesting vote guidance from the committee today is regarding the half-day kindergarten. So our numbers to date are right there. I probably were updated, gosh, I want to say Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and they're regularly updated as we have move-ins and move-outs and those sorts of things. You can see your numbers in your sections at each of your elementary schools, and then in parentheses right after you can see your half-day kindergarten numbers. The past couple of years we've had relatively low half-day kindergarten enrollments. Right now we're at 4 students that are half-day kindergarten. And so it's the recommendation of the committee to do an embedded model, which would essentially embed half-day kindergarten students in a kindergarten class at their home school, so at their home district, based on where you live, obviously. You can see a brief explanation of it there. Students would come in morning session. You can see the start times there, arrival and start times. Participating in directed instruction, standards-based mathematics instruction, ELA and social studies and science, etc. Specialist classes, as typical. And then at halfway point, any student enrolled in half day will be dismissed at 11:55. The second half of the day is usually exploratory and reinforcement as well. Lunch, recess, and those sorts of things are full day 2. What we're asking of the committee today is to vote because it is a budgetary impact, and vote to support the recommendation for an embedded half day. I also want to be frank with the committee. I think we've said it before. I think sometimes there's this misconception that half day is the same as full day, just faster, and it's not. It really is half. And I want to share with you briefly my personal experience and view as a dad for a moment. I've got a 12-year-old at home. He did full day kindergarten. That boy bounces off the walls, and he needed full day, structured day, no question. My daughter has some needs, and she's going to need half day. And that's not that he got better, but he is different. And 2 kids can be different, and it's an opportunity for families to make that choice. But I just want to address the misnomer that half day is like full day and faster. It's not. There will be less kindergarten if you choose half day. But I think this embedded model has a couple of benefits. The first is that it ensures that there's not going to be transitions. So if you live in the Hadley district and go to Hadley kindergarten, you're at Hadley kindergarten. the end of it. And the second is an efficient use of our resources to have a full section dedicated to half-day kindergarten. So I'll open up any questions that you might have. I'll be happy to answer them at first, and then maybe turn it over to the principals as well for further detail.
Have any conversations, or do we have any feedback from the parents of the 4 students that will be embedded, like what are their feelings on it?
No, we didn't survey those parents or reach out. We certainly can.
So they know that, but they know that like this is where their child will be. They'll have to. And so there's no discussion until we vote on it.
Right.
No discussion.
Getting guidance from the committee first about what you're recommending, what you're asking us to do.
I mean, I understand the fiscal.
I think it's a great idea, especially given the numbers. You know, you get the child who's going to go to kindergarten, going to their home school, probably on the bus or walking with their siblings, that type of stuff. So I don't really see any downside to it. What I will say, however, is that given the numbers of half-day kindergarten, and one of my granddaughters, their parents chose for half-day because it was right for her, but the younger one, I don't know. So it is a personal decision, but to me, the numbers of full-time kindergarten students, in my opinion, underlines the necessity that full-time kindergarten not be a fee-based program. I get more adamant on that every year. All but 4 kids in Scituate are going to full-day kindergarten, and those other, whatever it is, 200 or whatever it might be,
210 is our
are
estimate.
paying big bucks for it, and it's not right.
I think that this program makes, or this recommendation makes sense purely just from a numbers perspective. I agree that 4 kids in a class may not make sense from a fiscal perspective, but also from a learning environment, having 4 kids, it may not be the best environment for them. My question, however, is, I know this is ongoing, we all understand that this is changing, and it most likely won't change dramatically, but is there a number of half-day enrollees that might necessitate that we have a standalone classroom? I'm assuming that it was based on I don't know, more than 60 kids in each of the schools, or whatever the number is that we proposed or estimated. But I just want to get an idea if we get 6 half-day kids, and we're going to have a separate program or classroom.
No, not for 6. And your first statement is the calculus there. It has a lot to do with just the numbers of students in kindergarten in general, right? So while it would be unlikely, because we're about 90% through our process, if we got some substantial, massive increase in kindergarten kiddos, and all of them were half-day, it may just necessitate a full section. And then we just have to reevaluate our entire kindergarten sectioning in general, and either add another section of kindergarten, full-day kindergarten, embedded, depending on the distribution of half-day students, or if the numbers of half-day are really substantial, which again would be highly unlikely, you'd add a section of half-day kindergarten, you'd have to amend your budget to add the staffing accordingly in either case.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I agree, it's not the best. I think I received an email from the community, and I have to say I agree it's not ideal for these kiddos. I guess to Janice's point, I think it's really important that the parents understand what this selection means. And as you have said many times and been very clear, it's not the same as a full-day program. And I know each child is different. I absolutely understand that. But I also would wonder if folks are choosing it for financial reasons as well. To Mike's point, we would love to have this be all day, free all-day kindergarten. So with that being said, I guess my point is I don't love this idea from a learning perspective. However, from a fiscal perspective, it makes sense. So it's a difficult item to vote on. I think as we discussed this past year, I believe if we do have a separate classroom, it's not just a teacher, but also a pair, or half a pair, or whatever that number is. Somewhere around, I don't know, $80,000, something like that, budget somewhere. So it's a difficult one, for sure. I think it's clear, to Janice's point, I think it's really important that these parents understand the option of choosing half-day K as versus going.
So when I saw this agenda item, I signed up for full day kindergarten. Like your 12-year-old, I tried to bounces off the wall, but was ready to sign up. To Mike's point, I wish it was free. But I do agree with Janice's point that it wasn't, there's a lot of questions that would come out of that from a parent that they wouldn't necessarily think of if they sign up for half-day K. Does my kid get bused home? You know, we gonna bus one kid? You know, what's, not that we know the full schedule, but like what's the schedule like for the school recess? You know, how much, not necessarily the learning, but the social aspect with, you know, a kid that hasn't gone to a preschool and doesn't have that huge interaction, how do they get that and are able to have that growth as well as just, you know, count to 20, know your colors of, you know, a full kindergarten curriculum. So I think at least for next year, it probably should be a little bit clearer, just
And like an
from a parent's perspective.
like an FAQ for
Yeah,
families.
like very
to
high
make
level.
That decision process, that's a great point. Just to underscore your question about transportation, yes, transportation will be included. If this was one student, transportation included. Because half-day K is a program that is free for children, and that includes bus to and from the schools that are available.
But I look at the paperwork and I remember not seeing that, so it's just like a very high level.
On the way.
If they pay for it.
Right, just like
Within
anyone
the
else.
1.5
Do you want to clarify that?
Right.
Go ahead.
Within the 1.5 miles or 2 miles, if you're going to Jenkins, if you opt into the bus program, you have to pay the $240. You would get a ride home. If you lived across the street and you're a half-day kindergarten student, you're not going to opt for the bus, so we're not going to give you a ride home. You have to opt in for the bus.
Just like any other student.
Just like any other kindergartner or anybody else that lives close to the school.
So for that one, so for that one Christian kid, there will be a van or a bus that'll pick them up.
If they
opt in.
Yeah,
Right.
if they opt in, yes.
So you see 3 different buses or vans?
No, we would have one.
And they would rotate.
Yep. They actually, I think it's one of the schools is, the family is right across the street. We looked at this.
Yeah, there'd be 2 schools ultimately between us.
Maybe it would be Cushing and Jenkins.
We have to vote on this?
Do you have a reservation?
No, I just think that as you, I feel strongly that you do that. I think that it's only fair, I think it's important that the parents understand what they're signing up for when they sign up for half-day K. So I recognize that it's hard to, I guess, advertise that when you don't know what it's going to look like. I just wish that they were potentially aware that it could look like this versus something else, that's all.
But looking at the numbers, if they change their mind tomorrow, they're still gonna get their own school. We're not over the cap for any of these schools, so if the 2 kids at Jenkins wanna go full day, we're still well under 20 kids.
Right.
So they could change their mind and go full day if they, you know, figure out a difference. 'Cause I've heard dozens of reasons why people do half day versus full day. So I mean, they could have their kids aren't ready, or
Right.
they just don't want to do it.
I just imagine that when they signed up for half-day kindergarten, this isn't exactly what they were envisioning.
I don't know if it'd be helpful to maybe hear from some of our elementary principals, offer some further detail. Ms. McKillop?
So currently Hadley houses the half-day program, so when we did the information night for the incoming kindergarten parents, I did address to them that year to year, we don't know which building houses that program, and also I had actually just come off the heels of South Shore Principals meeting where everybody was talking about this and lots of other districts were going this way. I did address at that moment too and just said, currently we have 5 students and a lot of school systems are heading towards embedded. And I explained what all of that was. I then had a separate meeting, like people that wanted half day came over. And oftentimes it wasn't necessarily people that said, I still might consider half day. It was more that I want those extra classes in a private dance or science or whatever for that last year. But it was at least for the people at that meeting, and that was many, many parents, it was brought up, we
Right,
did address
and-
that.
but you have 0 half-day K,
But
right?
at Hadley, right?
At Hadley. So that goes to
But
the
that was
point.
everybody, no,
No,
it
that
was
was
the district.
full info
It was the whole
set.
district.
Everybody got it.
So I met people,
Alright.
like, I know there was someone from Jenkins, and,
Yeah.
so but they came and spoke with me, because if it
So
was
they're
the half day,
aware-
it was at Hadley.
They're aware that this could be happening.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
I feel better.
If they attended me.
If they,
But there were a lot of them.
You get a good turnout for that every year,
Yeah.
though.
Okay.
A few hundred folks every year.
the 4 half-day, the enrollment in half-day K has not changed since enrollment opened, correct?
It's 4 kiddos for the past month and a half.
I move the school committee embed the engagement therapy program for the next school year.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No, yes, I'm opposed.
Yes, you're opposed.
Yes.
He's opposed. Moving on, the Unified Sports Program.
For that, you see in front of you a follow-up memo to our conversation. Again, I highlighted this a little bit at our previous meeting, the leadership report. I've got our athletic director, Mr. Umbriana, here as well. A little bit about unified sports that gets held through the Special Olympics. It's a really cool program to be able to give students with disabilities and those students without disabilities an opportunity to work together in an athletic endeavor. It looks a little bit different than the Special Olympics in that this program would be a sport. Under MIAA, it would be a sanctioned Scituate public school sport and would compete with other towns in our region. We do have some other towns in the region that already have a unified sports program, and I want to give some kudos to Mr. Umbriana for bringing this initiative to Scituate as well. We have an incredible special education program here. We have a lot of really great programs for kiddos with disabilities as well as those without, and this just adds to the portfolio of experiences that we can offer kids. The reason I'm asking the committee to vote on it today is because it would include an amendment to your CBA with the Scituate Teachers Association to include a stipended position of $1,000 to be the advisor for this program. The district, if this is approved, would receive a $2,000 grant from Special Olympics. $1,000 would go to the advisor, $1,000 would go to equipment, materials, etc., to start getting this program off the ground. You can see in the bullets there some logistics about the events and about the experiences for kids. Mr. Umbriana, I know you have a less than typical voice right now, but if you want to add anything to that as well.
Yeah, not a problem. Sorry, I'm battling this cold and lost my voice at the basketball game yesterday. Luckily, we still won. So, if approved, this program, the whole idea behind it, we had it at Weymouth last year, and it's one of the most rewarding and just amazing programs. There's actually 90 schools that are going to be doing spring track and field for Unified throughout the state of Massachusetts. As Superintendent Griffin said, a lot of local schools, Duxbury, Hingham, actually pretty much half the Patriot League already has Unified track and field. A couple other local schools as well. Program would start March 23rd, and usually you're looking at probably the last date. They actually offer a state championship meet for athletes to compete in, which would take place May 27th. So that's kind of the length. Practices go about anywhere from 1 to 2 times a week for about an hour or so, right after school. And then 2 meets that are home and 2 meets that are away. So the good thing is a lot of the schools are local, so you're not traveling significant amounts to get to away meets. Each meet features 8 different events, and so how the team is comprised of is it's 50% athletes, which are your kids with disabilities, and then it will be 50% partners that are kids that do not have a disability, and they all mold together to make one team. They work together and compete against other towns. And then obviously at the end there's a couple different individual sectional meets and state championship meets, with the whole idea, of continuing to build inclusion throughout not only Scituate Public Schools, but also the community as well. The 8 different events, there's 5 different running events and 3 different throwing on field events, which is the shot put, long jump, and the turbo javelin. Relay teams will consist of 2 runners with intellectual disabilities and 2 partners without disabilities. And I put a couple little different equipment items that would be needed in year 1, 2 6-pound shot puts, just a uniform top, batons for relays. Obviously, our track and field program here already now has those, so that's easy, and 2 turbo javelins, which Special Olympics does provide in year 1, and you get to keep those throughout. So it's a pretty small list of equipment that would be needed. And yeah, each meet, runs about your typical. We would actually have our varsity spring track and field team run the meet. So all the kids would be doing all the clocks and the times and the distances and stuff like that. Our advisor would be in charge of just keeping track of everybody's. And then once we get to the actual meets, when we play other towns, they'll match up, times and distances for each competitor. So you're not going against somebody that's going to run the 100 relay and there's a minute difference in between. So you're going against, like abilities, like talent, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Yep. Not a problem.
Everybody went to the community, and again, kudos to Mr. Umbriana for bringing this initiative forward.
Is it so March 23rd, like in 3 weeks?
That's right.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah, and if this is just a pilot program, obviously, but if we expect it to have success, and we hope that it will continue on long after this year.
All right. No, I think it's great. I would just, I guess, 2 questions. 2 comments. One is, I'm not sure if it would dovetail with it, but there is a pretty strong Special Olympics program, track program in existence now, which is sponsored or practiced in Scituate, but there's kids from all ages and outside the community. So I don't think there's an opportunity. There's a lot of Scituate kids involved in that already, so I'm hoping that they would participate in something like this.
We did some logistics work in anticipation of an affirmative vote by the committee, and so if it's approved today and the MOU is approved that amends the CBA, we'd send communication out to our families through our CPAC and through some other organizations that will help get the word out about it.
The only other question, which is not really a loaded question, but is this only for in-district kids?
For all Scituate students, just like any program is. So if we had an out-of-district student who wanted to be part of the football team, they certainly could as well. It is truly an MIAA sport that they can participate in.
Else in the deep end like usual.
Sorry.
Past us, they doing.
I got just one question. It has to do with the memorandum of understanding, which is on the agenda. So, am I correct in assuming that that advisor would be someone on our staff now?
Likely. It would still be posted, but if there's no one on the staff that wants to do it, just like we would post the track team or something, would go out externally.
Okay, so you haven't posted yet?
No, not until we get the okay.
Do I hear a motion?
Is this going to be free for the students, or do they need to follow the sports fees?
Good question.
This year is grant.
It is grant funded. I'll double check on that. I believe in the first 3 years, there's a grant that's intended to cover those costs from Special Olympics, and after the 4th year, school districts are intended to absorb the program like any other program. So my inclination is there's no fee to it, is the way I'm reading it.
So go for it.
Yes. I think that's and in the event there would need to be, that would be costly.
The athletic fee.
No, there wouldn't need to be because there's no
Probably not,
transportation.
you're only doing 4
There is
meets.
transportation.
There is some
Away meets.
transportation for 2 away meets. I think you'd have to look at that later on after this year.
I would say that given that we're getting the grant, we should be able to cover the costs immediately this year, but it's an excellent question for the future years. It's such a light lift program, so I would be confident to say we'd have the resources to cover it this year just through the grant, absolutely free of charge. but there'd have to be a conversation in future years about a fee for it. Especially given the volume we have during school.
Is the program slated to expand, Peter? Like, more meets?
It hasn't grown in 3 years.
So it's always been?
It's always been 4.
Okay.
And there's basketball in the fall and bocce in the winter as well.
Maybe we can host one once our track's done.
Absolutely.
Well, you know I'm going to mention this, Ron, is that this is the second time tonight we're talking about some really great stuff that potentially could cost families money, whether next year or in the future, and it's just another good reason. Scituate Public Schools should be a free public school system. And seeing, in my words, fees that we charge make no sense to me, and certainly violate the state constitution. And we're just lucky no one's chosen to sue us. So, just make that. 2 great programs that potentially, well, one we know is costing people money, and one might. So,
We can go no fee for sure for the first year given that grant, and a conversation for the district, I think, going forward.
Well, it's just for the lateness of us offering this. And then it's 1 to 2 times a week as opposed to sports, which is typically at least 5 days a week. It's only 2 meets. It's a great opportunity for our kids. So I just want to make sure that we, don't exclude anybody or have someone think, oh, I can't do it because of the fee, when really we want to get this program up and running as much as we can.
Absolutely. Good, well said.
Can I just make a quick note, Michael? We have eliminated 2 fees. We've eliminated for high school students going to basketball games, football games, and we've also eliminated the activity fee. That was here, and that was probably 3 or 4 years ago. So we've eliminated 2, we're getting there. So a lot more to go.
What are you looking for from me? A pat on the back, or?
No.
And again, it's not.
No, I know.
It's not a school department problem. It's a town-wide problem that needs to be addressed by the entire town, not just the school department. And the funding for public education in the town of Scituate needs to change. It's been that way for 20 years, but nobody. It's the elephant in the room, is that has needed to change, and that need to change increases every year.
This is the motion to amend the STA. I'll make a motion. You ready? Make a motion to amend the Scituate Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement to include a unified Special Olympics advisor stipend of $1,000 for the 2020 spring season to be funded by a grant.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up is the FY21 operating budget. What? Oh, I'm sorry. The policy rules.
I know we're trying to move it along, so I'll be brief. What you have in front of you is proposed policy BO to your policy. A little bit about this policy is for Special Education Reserve Fund. Essentially, the Municipal Modernization Act allows communities to set a special education reserve fund or revolving account that would cover costs for unanticipated out-of-district special education costs, essentially. Something that we've talked about over the budget process over the past several months, and what you have in front of you is draft language formulated from some recommendations from around the Commonwealth, from other districts that already have this model. A couple things about a special education reserve fund. It's intended to be able to be used specifically for special education services and not for other uses. Unlike, say, like a capital stabilization fund, it would require a majority vote by the school committee and board of selectmen to release the funds. And what you see here over your shoulder and your back up as well, and I can blow this up for you a little bit. Establishing the fund has some criteria that's already set by statute. For example, the fund can't exceed 2% of your annual net student spending. Interest in the fund itself remains with the fund, just like you have with any revolving account. With this particular fund, we'd set the floor at about $100,000 annually, and transferring funds into the special education fund would require recommendations, in our case, from the Financial Forecast Committee. And that would occur each year as they do financial forecasting for the entire community each year. Transferring funds out, as I talked about earlier, would require the school district to make a letter, formal letter to the Board of Selectmen. So district, if we identified significant unanticipated special education costs like we had this year, would put those forward as part of the budget process, communicate those to the school committee, put a memo as we typically do that outlines what it is. The school committee and school district would then send that information over to the Board of Selectmen for vote as well. If both groups voted, it would be approved for a transfer of funds. You see here the kinds of costs that the Special Education Reserve Fund can be allocated toward: out-of-district tuitions, transportation, and then contract services. I know we've talked about these at length over the past couple of months. We've talked about all things budget. These are the three most volatile lines in any school district budget, and they've been particularly volatile this year. So we feel strongly that this fund would help safeguard the community, help safeguard the school district from any future unanticipated spikes in those costs going forward. I also included for you, just to give you some background and some context, smattering of school districts in our region that do and do not have a special education reserve fund already developed. The language that you have in your policy was developed thanks to some input from our colleagues, superintendents in the region who already have said special education reserve fund. So it's our request from the committee to have a first reading of that policy today and a vote on it at the March 23rd.
Do you know if these other towns that do have these funds, they've certainly done like the past year or so? I'm curious.
I don't know the dates that they were approved. I don't know that. I can go dig on that if you'd like.
I'm just curious if, they run into it. I mean, I know they have run into the same issues we have.
I would say that 201, the reason that districts have that is because they've run into unanticipated special education service costs. They all hold them a little bit differently in terms of their ceiling, not in terms of ceiling, in terms of their floor, in terms of their funding mechanism. We've sat down with our colleagues in the town to talk a little bit about what that would look like at financial forecast and how we think about the resource allocation there. It would essentially be any free cash. We'd have a conversation about free cash distribution, and as free cash becomes available, some portion of that, not all of it obviously, could be diverted to a special education reserve fund. And just like any rainy day fund you have at home, you sock away money over time, and then if there is that rainy day, you're able to draw from it.
No, I'm in full support of this. I just want to confirm, this is planned to be on the warrant for the annual town meeting, correct?
Correct.
It would only be pulled if we did not approve it.
Correct. Put a draft on there already as they're starting to develop that. Given our conversations about budget, the assumption that it's not about the value of it in general, but rather the mechanics of funding. That's usually where school districts and towns have lots of conversation.
And as it's on the warrant, they will call you up and you will...
I'll share with them what I shared with you essentially. Yeah. And just for clarity, it's on the warrant only to establish a fund, not to fund the fund. Correct. Better word for that. Not to appropriate to the fund.
Understood.
So when would that?
You're not going to appropriate it this year?
No appropriation this year. The mechanism that we've had here would be through next year's, well, it would be through the end of this year's financial forecast, right? So when the state approves their budget, gets the appropriations, if there's free cash available, and typically there is because we budget conservatively as a community, then the financial forecast would have a conversation about if and or how much of that free cash could be appropriated to this fund. That would happen at special town meeting in the fall.
So a special town meeting would be potentially the first time we are able to put money into it.
Correct. You'd establish an annual, and then you'd appropriate in the fall, and then it would typically be every fall special town meeting, because by that point, you've already had an understanding of what any free cash allocation would be.
And I just want to say, I mean, this conversation has been going on for a while, and at least since last summer. And I just want to commend your team, Ron, and board, and especially because I think this has been a good opportunity for inter-school and town collaboration. And the more we can have that, the better our town will be and the better our school system.
Thank you, and echo that wholeheartedly.
Okay, I agree, this is a great idea. I just have a question on the funding. So did you say the money could come from free cash from the town?
It would come from free cash, period, right? So any free cash that would exist, either through surplus from any department, including the school department, if there was surplus, and or any other department, or through additional appropriations in the local and state aid, would generate free cash. So that's the way free cash is generated, and then, like they always do,
It's not allocated from our 2/3 of the budget.
It
It's
is-
allocated from outside of that.
it is not, and just for full clarity, unless there was a surplus from the school department that created free cash.
Well, the reason I ask is in the first paragraph you have on the first page, the second last sentence is the balance shall not exceed 2% of the annual net spending.
That's correct.
So are we bound by that, by the?
That's
by the
statute.
law?
That's
Okay.
statutory, that wouldn't be policy. And if you look at the statute for this, net school spending is just the generic cap that the state sets for all of these. So net school spending for Boston would be substantially more than ours, obviously, but it just allows the state to say, you can't just throw money in here for forever and keep some massive amount of resource set aside. That's taxpayer money.
So what would be the largest number that you could have in the next year or two?
2% of the net school spending, we're at about 44, so,
800?
yeah.
And I would just underscore that while that's 2% of net school spending, 800, typically these are at about 300, 350, 400.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
It's great. I don't know how long, I know we've been talking about it since last time. I'm not sure how long the district has been talking about it. I don't know why it's taken so long to establish, to talk about or finalize that plan. So yeah, I appreciate the work on that.
Moving on.
Did we vote?
No.
Next time.
Oh, next, in a couple of times, yeah.
Now is the FY #21 operating budget.
So you have an updated, I have two documents that are helpful, I think, for the committee. One is an executive summary memo, and the other is the actual operating budget document, 44 pages of it. What I would suggest would be to maybe go through the memo, talk about changes at each part. We can ask you questions, you might have those questions. We can then loop back to the document itself, dive into the document. If that works for you, I'll hop in. So two things in general. We continue to monitor the information coming out of Beacon Hill regarding state aid numbers. They have certainly fluctuated recently, so we monitor those closely. No changes to this point. We also need to track out-of-district costs and projections for next year. Obviously, those have fluctuated recently, so we try to keep a close eye on those. Again, kudos to Ms. Miller and Mr. Donlin for their work there. We're always assessing staff retirements and turnovers this time of year. Those number changes over the next few months, although similar to kindergarten enrollment, we're starting to get close to that number now. And finally, enrollment number changes. As those things change, that changes our need, as we talked about with kindergarten. If you have some influx in students, then you need to amend your budget accordingly to meet those needs and meet those sections. Page 1, budget development. We talked about this at our last meeting. School committee slate to vote on the 23rd of March. Questions on that? Meeting. Part 2, no change in educational priorities. That outlines our strategic plan and how our budget connects to our strategic plan. Part 3 is the budget itself. It's probably the one that's most apropos for today. Your executive summary has changed, obviously, to update the most up-to-date staff retirements and those sorts of things. I want to note page 11, page 12, page 14, page 16 are all elementary schools that you see there. One of the requests that Ms. Brandolini had through our process was to have drill down data outlining all of the special education programs that are district programs, but they're housed at an elementary school. So for example, we have our LBC at a language-based classroom at the Jenkins, and we have our ILC and our PLC at Hadley and so on. So the request was to do a calculation of the cost of just those programs separate from the costs of operating the schools themselves. So you've got that there in your background. And I want to underscore an item that we talked about last time. The state does require our reporting to include related costs at a school to be reported with the school. So your GEMS program at the Jenkins is reported with the Jenkins to the state, which is why we have kept that as part of the Jenkins budget ultimately. But that breakout helps you see the costs there. The only exception to that would be programs in which we have a single staff member. Yes, we're all public servants, and yes, all of our information is public information, and as a means to try to give our staff members some semblance of having some
Privacy.
Yeah, thanks for privacy there, their information. If it's single salary, it's not included specifically. If the committee would like that, I can certainly provide that for you as well. Questions on the elementaries there? I think that would be helpful to kind of dig through together as one group, or any of the specialized programs at the elementary schools.
So Ron, I know I emailed you about this like 2 weeks ago now. So is there, what is it? I know you said you're going to add a third second grade teacher for Hadley. Are there any other staffing additions or subtractions across, I guess, all 6 schools that started with these 4?
Yeah, the one for Hadley has been able to be added not even through the budget process, but actually through turnover, and that's been super helpful, right? None at this time, but we do continue to monitor, like there's a couple of developments that are going on in town, and that could potentially change enrollments, and so we'll continue to monitor those, and if there are, we may come to you with an amendment or, as per our policy that we approved back in October, an amended transfer of funds from one to another in order to provide additional section. Did that answer the question? Tell me if it didn't.
No, it did. I just, some of this was highlighted with where the changes were. I didn't see that anywhere. So I just wanted to see where, without digging through everything, where any staffing changes occur. Just in general, not necessarily just one school.
I know there's lots of questions about the Hadley though, so I want to name that right off the bat, right? So we've got 14 sections there, and that does include additional sections of the 2nd and 4th grade. Remember, this year the question was really about the number of students in our 1st grade, and so you'll see an additional section of 2nd grade as that cohort goes from 1st grade to 2nd grade next year, as built into that. Gates, the big thing there is obviously our specialized program. I want to underscore that it remains to be a called out number in your overall summary, not currently embedded in the Gates program until it's a budget that's voted by the committee, at which time it would be embedded into the Gates operating budget. Otherwise, you see further detail on materials and supplies as you requested as well, but no other changes for the Gates. Scituate High School, again, very much the same. Some further details on supplies and equipment. No other changes, though, in terms of staffing and those sorts of things for Scituate High School. Page 22 is the district services, in particular special education and out-of-district services. That's where we really had the meat of our conversation over the past few months. A couple of things that are important to keep in mind. Updated number for projections for out-of-district costs. And increase for the van drivers. Thank you, Mr. Gates, for bringing that to the district's attention. The ultimate purchase of the vans, having the drivers in there is obviously important. We've got that in the operations. In anticipation for a capital investment. Now, obviously, if the capital investment is not approved, we'd have to reappropriate the money in the budget. Page 23 gives you that drill down data that we talked about. I'll show that to you as well, just again to give you context for it. There's that drill down data we talked about, right? This idea of where our placements are, special education out of district costs, the number of students and the kinds of placements that they have, average tuition, percentage of average tuition over time, and percentage increase as well. Before I leave part 3, questions, concerns, items you want us to follow up on?
Is this document somewhere that we can look at it? Is it online?
maybe, well, I was gonna ask that at one of these.
Oh, okay.
I was just thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, just curious. Does the school committee have its own budget? Do we have our own budget for our, like, there's conferences and? No, there's like.
We don't get a check.
No, no, I guess.
Don't miss that joke. Thank you, Mr. Long.
No, the budget in terms of education and opportunities and conferences and that sort of thing. I feel like,
yes.
I feel like none of us have.
You do.
I know. I don't know what that budget is, and I know that we are often, or not often, but
It includes,
solicited to attend certain conferences, and for a variety of reasons, I don't think we participated, and I think if we knew that we had X amount of dollars, whatever that number is, 500, 1,000, whatever it is, maybe we'd be inclined to use it and actually go. So Paul, what do we got?
you do have a budget. You have your secretary in there. We have the MASC dues that you pay in that same budget. There's also conferences in there, travel.
But I don't know what that number is, and I don't know where we stand with it, so it would be nice to know what that number
I will
is.
tell you that number, I'll get that number for you.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. No, I'm sure it's something, I just want to know what, I don't care if it's 1,000 or, it's probably something like $6,000 or $7,000, I guess, but I don't really know.
I believe that's pretty close to what it is.
But I know Nicole's attended a couple conferences. I attended a couple when I started, and it's one of the orientation stuff for a new school committee, going to a mass conference or something along those lines.
But Mask offers that like 4-day conference.
Right.
That
You could
go
go to.
to, but it costs like $1,000 or something dollars. Yeah, whatever it is, but I didn't know that we had a budget to pay for that, so I just was curious what it is, that's all. I'm not gonna ask you for more, I'm just curious what it is.
Any other questions on operating
Well,
budget?
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions since I haven't been around for a while.
Right.
But in reading the executive summary and then looking, through the full budget, it's my assumption that our level funded budget means no one is losing a job or being cut back.
Correct.
And that the only two educational priorities that will be funded next year will be the math and the sped teacher. Those are the only two. Is that right?
That's correct, those are two there. And Appendix B has all of them, because I want to underscore there are lots of others, but the two that are highlighted are the two in the budget.
Well, I guess maybe I didn't notice the shading, but I got excited when I first looked at it. Saw the $1,137,000 at the bottom, and said, boy,
Doing all right.
we're doing all right. But
And I don't mean to tease folks with it, but I say this with our leadership team as well. I think it's important to just share that with our community. We are fortunate to be able to have local and state aid that ensure that we're not going to have to do any cuts this year. That is a challenging conversation to have, and we're fortunate to have those resources. And as we talked about with the SOA plan, those resources allow us to invest in those two in addition to ensuring that we have level services.
Especially pleased, again, Mike and I, when we were working on the teacher's contract with the entire negotiating team, this was a priority for us to look forward in the current budget, that we were going to do what we can to increase our services, but that we were committed to keeping our staff. And I mean, that may sound easy, it's really hard. Given our resources, so a lot of kudos to go around to everybody.
Thank you.
I have to answer Mr. Gates.
7,000.
No, there is $5,200 for the clerical salary. There's $1,200 for supplies. There's $1,500 for conferences. You have the $85,000 for the teacher in your budget. No, for $85,000 for their continuing education. They get paid up to $1,000. That's in your budget, school committee. You have $9,000 in contractual services in case you need to. And you have $6,000 in membership. And that would be, contractual services would probably be for MASC, which you belong to. employee membership.
So that's our annual budget?
That's your annual budget, yes.
So how are we staying? How much we got left?
Oh, this year? Oh,
You don't tell me that.
yeah, I'll let you know.
We have a quarterly update coming anyway, in
Yep.
quarter 3. You
Sure.
can get that information. It just helps.
And there's nothing wrong on your radar or administration's radar that would change anything between now and the 23rd?
No, the next 2 weeks, absolutely not. Again, the big items that are always under review, enrollment, out of district. Placements.
No, those are givens.
But those projections we have here are conservative. Questions on part 3, operating? Last is funding and resources. You see an executive summary there as well. Page 30 has the full day K. These projections adjusted lower. Again, it's conservative. Right now, we've got about 199, 198 students enrolled. We are projecting 210. At our current rate, we may end at like 206, 205. It varies a little bit. So we wanted to adjust down with that to make sure that we have a conservative revenue number there. Again, underscoring we've got lots of construction going around town, so that's a variable. So we're not sure about that. Part 5, no changes to beyond level services. Part 6, you see the executive summary there, and I'll kind of pull it up to bring it all together for you. And your question about, is this on the website? Yes, this operating budget is on the website. Actually, what I do is for any operating budget, and it's on like the Friday that you all get your backup things that are related to the budget, we have uploaded right to the budget section of our school district's website, so that's available for the community.
Do we show every version of this document or just the most recent?
We always update it, so it's just like this is the operating budget, not the preliminary budget. So you have like this one that you're seeing here is the one that's there right now.
But are we putting this memo up there as well to show any changes that we've done in the past? Or can we?
Yeah, we have the memo up there if you like.
Just so that if I'm sitting at home trying to reconcile 2 44-page documents, it's not.
You got it. Add
What's
memo.
the one word you changed on page 17?
Memo. You got it. Okay.
All right, then we have come to the second opportunity for comment statements, questions from the public.
Josephine Manley, 12 Buttermilk Circle. And I have a question again about transparency, and it relates to the budget. At the Saturday budget meeting, there was a lot of discussion about people wanting more detail behind the numbers. And I was told that there's a 600 line item document, and to discuss it in detail would take 3 days. So of course nobody wanted to discuss it in detail, but I did, along with many other parents, want to see what the detail was behind it. So I submitted a public records request, again, along with several other people, some of them are here tonight. And I was careful to ensure that my request asked for the detail, but not at such a granular level that it would reveal personal salaries or personal information about special education costs. The response that I got was, at this time, there are no records responsive to your request. So, if there were in fact 600 line items making up the numbers that we were shown at that meeting, then my public records request, along with everyone else's, was denied? Or does the detail not exist? And I'm perhaps more concerned now when I learn that, for example, the school committee is not sure what's in their budget. So how can we as parents and community members be confident about how these budgets are being developed? And then can you please explain to me why the 600 line items were not made available to me? And that's to Mr. Griffin, perhaps Mr. Donovan, because they were the ones who said the 600 line items.
Well, I mean, we can address this operating budget, which isn't finalized, because we don't have a definitive, a finalized budget until the close of the budget.
So I think that was very clear at the time. I mean, obviously it was the first meeting, people showed up. What parents and community members want to know is what is behind that. And so, again, am I not supposed to grab questions?
No.
So, Mr. Griffin, can you help me understand why the level of detail that you said was available at that date was not made available to the parents, again, multiple parents who submitted the public records request?
Sure, it's just an incomplete report, so it's not a report that we have available for FY21. So we had other family members who asked for FY20, for example. We submitted that for folks. That's a complete report that we have. We pull it, there's about 600 lines on there, 580-something other lines on there. FY21 is just not a report that's complete. What you do have is 44 pages of FY21. It's on our budget. As I mentioned at the meeting, a couple of different meetings, if this is a format that the community and the district would like to do differently in the future, you certainly may. But that's the format that we have currently is the document that you have on the website right now. And there's no other format that exists at this moment for FY21. When there is, once the budget is approved and it gets formatted in that way into the software, you can request the FY21 and you certainly have that as well.
But to be clear, at that meeting, it was, what I was asking for at that meeting was the detail behind the document that we were all viewing at that date, which clearly was not the final document. And you said you could make available the detail behind that. I asked for that. And
That's not accurate, and so I didn't say I could make that available for you. And let me clarify that, is that a budget for our school district has about 600 lines in it. We structure it in this way with the intent to try to communicate information to families about what Title I is and how you get Title I money and what a grant looks like and what an offset looks like. And while we would want to charge fees, we do charge fees, and there's about $1.4 million in fees, and here that all of that information goes into that document. The lines that I think were talked about, sort of bantered back and forth, are the software that we use that articulates where all of the funds get to accounts. That's not built for FY21, so your request for that can't be filled. But again, folks ask for like, oh, let me see FY20 or 19. That's available in our software. We shared that per the records request regulations.
okay, so just so I'm clear then, when you, and Mr. Donald and yourself are building this budget, it's not from the detail up?
It's not complete in that area. You're welcome.
So at what point is the information available then to parents and community members?
Yeah, it'd probably be July 1 when the budget is put into the software. So at the start of the fiscal year.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, sorry. Jen O'Neill, Gannett Road. I have a question back to what Mr. McClellan had asked earlier about query checks on people driving the van, and I think this is directly related to the 12-passenger van that is used, I know, here at the high school for smaller teams and for like math team and anything smaller for as a supplement for, I know the cross-country team used it when there was not enough room on the bus. Because they're not bus drivers, my understanding, the bus drivers are not able to drive that van. So teachers or coaches are driving it. Are their driving records being checked?
Yes.
Okay. So their driving records are being checked at the beginning of every school year or at the beginning of every
Well,
season?
it's as needed. So the coaches don't automatically drive that van. So I think when it's requested, we do the query check.
So,
Not a query
No.
check, we do a driving record check.
Driving record check.
but I know one time this year, the assistant coach for the cross-country team, they realized there was not enough room on the bus, so they scrambled to get kids on that van. So I think possibly, if there's a possibility that they're going to be driving, that their records should be checked prior to the start of the season? Is that something that we could do?
We could talk about that, but I mean, when it was first discussed having this passenger van available to staff, I had asked how were we going to ensure that we check their driving records, because we hired them to do the query and the fingerprinting, but when they're in the classroom, they're not expected to drive.
Right.
But so that's why I had asked at that time, which was last year, how we.
I was at the meeting, I remember that. That's why
So
I was
when the
concerned.
request was put in, correct me if I'm wrong,
then we have Sarah, the SRO, who can, check it like that.
Okay, and are they doing a full R&B, or are they doing just the, not, there's two different types you can do?
We get clearance from them. We don't
Yep.
micromanage the way in which they do that. And I would just say that the reason that we do that is because we want to make sure whenever the request comes in that we're getting the most up-to-date information. So while a query and a fingerprint occur at a less frequent time than, say, you want to go drive the van for some the golf team or something, you could have had some driving infraction between when the last time you got queried was and when you asked to go drive the van, which is why we want to do that on a regular basis as needed, rather than simply blanket, because there could be time between the two of those. That's why you do that when the
But a query doesn't always, I mean, your driving record will show accidents, lives, things like that, where your query, you can have those.
I want to just underscore that that's why it's a driving record check, not a query.
Okay, no, that's why I want to be sure that driving records for anyone who could drive that van are being checked on a regular basis, because I know my child's been in that van with a coach. I'm under the impression that, the records were checked.
Yeah,
prior
no,
to
I specifically asked, when this whole
So in
process
the case of
started.
Mr. McClellan, was the driving record checked?
The driver was checked.
And I want to just underscore and caution us that we should not talk about individual employee, HR, or personnel-related situations.
Well, this is a sort of generalization. I mean, any coach
It is, but
possibly could be driving should be checked. I mean, the gymnastics coach, or she's all of a sudden not in bus and they need to get those.
that's why I had asked.
Right, but now you're saying that it only happens if a request is put in?
Well, if they have to ask for the bus, I mean, the van, they have to ask.
But could they ask the day up?
No.
I'm just making sure, because it seems to me that there was some miscommunication, or some things fell through the cracks.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, yes.
Yolanda Davdova, 142 Country Way. Jen Morrison had sent you guys an email on March 1st regarding start times, and she suggested considering to move the middle school start time to 8:15 to be at the same time as the high school, with the reasoning being that there's no construction traffic that's going to be happening next school year, and also the cost of idling buses right now that happen, and also a lot of I think the high school kids are bused in way early, so they're just at school much earlier than they need to be. So is there any consideration before the current superintendent leaves, so that we don't have to start the whole process again, to keep pushing towards a healthier start time of 8:30 versus the current 8 o'clock?
I have not as part of any discussions that with the school calendar that we'll be voting on at the next March meeting, unless another member wants to discuss that as part of a future agenda item.
So would you like to hear more from others to request that, so it's on the agenda?
No, I think I personally, I know how a lot of people feel about it. But as of right now, it's not being discussed. Moving on, we're in signatures. Paul?
I don't think there was one. Was there?
No.
Yeah, there's 3. Yeah.
Right here.
I missed that, I'm sorry.
Correspondence, the mass.
Oh, no. That was for the, if Peter had signed something or you had signed, as a single signature, that, we didn't have any of those. We didn't have any of those.
We had the regular one.
We had the regular one.
I did sign on Monday.
That will go on the next, because we hadn't cut the checks in The next one, 23rd.
So I'm back at work now.
You are, okay. Good.
Need be.
How do you for Cindy?
Yes, Cindy.
All right, and the correspondence as a mass bulletin, the next drive, for everybody to look at. Future agenda items.
Well, maybe not, but again, that can be a while. Could you give me 20 seconds on where we are with the middle school construction?
With concrete. So we're currently continuing to go back and forth with a group of lawyers at this point to try to find a consolidated resolution so that there are more than two parties working toward that. So to spread out the responsibility to all the parties and subcontractors, etc. We feel like there's been progress, it's been very slow, and we're in the process right now of asking our legal team to continue to put pressure on the other groups to respond to communications and respond to requests. I wish I had better news for
I
you.
didn't miss the building committee today.
No, there's been no action to take at this moment. We're still trying to come to some consolidated resolution.
And I'll just briefly ask Paul, to give me that, about our favorite discussion as to the remediation of dead bushes and trees. And did we get that money?
I don't
Was
think
it
so.
$10,000?
No, I don't
We
think
were gonna
we did.
get?
Let me call Shane on the way home. I'll find out.
But on that, so Greg.
Yeah.
So Greg,
Landscaping, yes. What?
So, every time I drive into this complex, I'm underwhelmed by the landscaping. Do you think that there's an internship available that might allow us to utilize the services of our students with some fine, I don't know, something, gardening, I don't know what the logistics of it are, but.
Anything's possible. No student has organically expressed the interest to weed in front of their peers.
No, weeding, more of landscaping, like actually like putting something to make it look nice, like nicer, rather than just crabgrass. I don't know, just a thought.
Social Go Tech has a landscape horticulture program. You know, it's 3 years, it's the 3rd year, which they're all juniors now, so it could be a
Again, I don't know what the rules are for them doing it on municipal ground. I know it's probably some labor issue, but just a thought. I cringe every time I drive from that up to the school, beautiful school, and you have that circle that's just like crabgrass.
I would just say that the committee and the district and the town spent a lot of money on that grass, ornamental grass in general, and just to honor the work that was done before I even arrived. There were committees that were designed to identify and give input on the kinds of plantings to ensure that they were drought tolerant and local and easy to maintain. I recognize and I honor Mr. Hayes' perspective that, and they still need to be maintained, and that's an onus on a number of parties to do all of that work and replace them as they die off and arborvitaes and those sorts of things. But I just would hate to lose sight of the work that was done in preparation for that.
Understood.
All right. Next up is the superintendent search update. Jim.
I'm going to trade places with Jim.
Yeah. All right.
Here.
Sit there. Or right here.
Oh, this is good.
This is Jim Hardy from the charge.
Couldn't get it to you in time to send it over to the faculty.
Good evening. 7:30, Jen? Yes? This evening I have the opportunity to review the results of the online survey as well as the 11 focus groups that were conducted in that 2-week period as we were soliciting input into the process and into the qualifications for the position of superintendent of schools here. First, I want to publicly acknowledge the efforts of Bonnie and Paul and Kim to help get everything set up, as well as the cooperation of all the building principals to allow me to meet with their staff on these different school days. A total of 774 people responded to the online survey. Just to point out, that's the highest participation level of any K-12 district we've done a survey with in the last since 2001. So the breakdown you see on that top page shows the different categories. 58.91%, or 456 of the responses identified themselves as parents with children enrolled in the schools. 25.06%, or 194 respondents, identified themselves as employees of the Scituate Public Schools. 9.82%, or 76 people, identified themselves as residents of Scituate without children enrolled in the Scituate schools. And at this point, I'd also like to thank the town administrator for allowing the link to the survey to go out in the Scituate email, the town email system. We saw an immediate bump in participation from residents in the 3 days immediately after that email blast, so that helped. That number stayed, was like at 9 or 10 for a long time until that happened. 18 people, or 2.33%, identified themselves as current students of the Scituate schools. 2 people identified themselves as graduates within the last 5 years, and then there were 28 individuals identified themselves as other. And if you look at the back page of that, you'll see the breakdown of what other was, and for the most part, it was people that had 2 roles. They were an employee and a resident, or an employee and a parent, and they didn't want to decide between one role, so they used the other to fit that category. So the questions that were asked were specifically targeted to identify one, what's the very first things that the next superintendent of schools is going to need to address? What are the current or the immediate future issues that will happen predominantly in year 1? And that was what question 2 was all about. And the top 5 responses to that question were: number 1, curriculum development and instruction; number 2, facilities management, building construction, which I don't think anybody is surprised in given the presentation earlier tonight; 3, financial management; 4, communication with parents and community; and number 5, educational leadership skills. I stopped at 5 because there was a pretty significant drop-off between the number 5 response and the number 6 response, going from 394 down to 300, or dropping from 50% down to 38.7% of the respondents. So that's where the cutoff ended being. So those were the top 5 things. To give you a little bit of an idea how the different groups responded to that question individually, the parents identified curriculum development and instruction as number 1, communication with parents and community, number 2, facilities management, building construction, number 3. And that represented all the responses that had more than 50% of the respondents identifying that as one of the top 5 issues for the district. Academic standards and student assessment was close. It was 48% of the respondents, and financial management was a little bit just over 48%. So those were the top 5 there. So those were parents. People identified themselves as employees, or 194 people, said financial management, number 1, staff relations, number 2, and educational leadership skills, number 3. And those were all well over 50% of the respondents. People who identified themselves as residents, or 76 people, curriculum development and instruction, number 1, financial management, number 2, and communication with parents and community, number 3. Those that identified themselves as students, or 18 of the people, academic standards, student assessment, which I thought was kind of interesting. Financial management, which I really thought was kind of interesting, that the students had that as well, and educational leadership skills. Those were, again, the top 3 respondents there. For the 2 alumni who participated, there were 3 that both of them had voted for: educational leadership skills, communication with parents and community, and school-based technology. This was the first category where the school-based technology jumped up into the top 5. All the rest of the respondents were 1. Excuse me. And under the other, we have 28 respondents. Facilities management, building construction, number 1. Communication with parents and community, number 2, and financial management, number 3. So we see a theme evolving. So that was that response. Then one of the things that, skipping over what question 3 was, which was an open-ended response, and going to what question 4 was, is identifying the top 5 skills and abilities of the job applicants that are most important to the Scituate Public Schools. And those came out to be successful school administrative experience. Number 2, excellent communication skills. Number 3, development and implementation of the budget. Number 4, ability to inspire the leadership team and staff. Number 5, success in improving, maintaining high academic performance. And number 6, understand and recognizes good teaching. I do want to say that the focus groups bore out, for those of you that had attended both the parent community focus groups, you heard basically that same theme going through. Communication was huge. School administrative experience was significantly identified. And we'll get into a little bit of that shortly as I go more into that. Something that I provided for you, all the open-ended responses to what do you believe is or will be the most important issue facing the next superintendent. I did color code them into certain categories. Just focus on the, not the light blue, but the blue that says facilities, and you could scan through these 25 pages and just see how many times facilities was identified as an issue. And I don't think anybody's surprised by that, given that this is something that, particularly with the elementary schools, because the elementary schools facilities were the ones most commonly identified, significantly identified as the facilities issue. And then after that would be the high school. And then third is maintaining this school, the Gates School. So all 3 of those, the Gates School. So it's 1, dealing with what's going on with the elementary schools, either rehab, renovate, replace, consolidate, whatever's going to happen. 2, the high school facility. And then 3, maintaining the investment that the town had with the Gates School and not letting it get to a place where, a significant amount of money needs to be spent to maintain it. So those were the 3 components and the 3 priorities that evolved out of the comments that you'll see as you read through the document. A lot of comments around student learning, both the questions, both supporting and criticizing the project-based learning. It was fairly even on both sides. Some people like it, some people don't like it. And that's probably true with just about anything that you do. But what the staff were very concerned about was they've invested a lot of time and energy in getting ready to do or implement these programs. What they're most concerned about is having a superintendent come in and just basically wipe everything off the board and say, now we're going to do all this. And that's a huge concern for staff. What they'd really like to see is the superintendent come in, assess, evaluate, listen, talk to people, form an opinion, tweak it, sure. Everything can be made better, but just don't throw it out for the sake of making change to put your own stamp, if you will, on the district. Another key topic was finance. It's part of it is, I think there were some people who believe you're spending too much money and believe your budget should be cut. And they took this opportunity to make their feelings known. So some of the budget comments in here are reeling in expenses and things related to that. But some of the budget questions were related to building maintenance too, so they kind of tied together in that aspect. Communication with basically every stakeholder group was also something that was important for people to see with the next superintendent. And I want to just put this in categories that these comments aren't necessarily critiques on anything previous. We asked what you want in the next superintendent. Some of it is what's in the current superintendent. Some of it isn't. So they identified what they're looking for in the next superintendent. They're not necessarily, should not be interpreted as a critique of any ongoing issue. It's like you had the opportunity to build the perfect superintendent. What skill set would that person have? And that was most of the people took that opportunity in making these comments, and particularly those that came to the focus groups, about making it clear that this was not looking backwards, this was looking forwards. And that reiterated, I think that message carried through. The last document that's in that stapled packet is a summary of the online survey and rolling in the results of the focus groups. All told, there were about anywhere between 100 and 110 participants in all of the focus groups. The two parent community ones were, I thought, pretty well attended. Some of the staff ones were really well attended, some were attended. I met with the staff of every school. I went to each school, and I went immediately after student dismissals while teachers were still there. Although it was open to any staff member, there were some non-teaching employees who were there. I also had the two community groups, one at 11 o'clock in the morning at the town library, one at 7 o'clock at night here. I met with the town administrator as an individual, and then as a group, the police chief, fire chief, and DPW were the three department heads that probably worked the closest with the schools and all the other ones. Administrative team, central office staff, so that made up the group. And so the first part of this is, again, just a quick summary of the survey and the participation in the focus groups. One of the questions I asked every focus group is, what makes Scituate so great? Why did you come to work here? What keeps you here? Why did you move here? And talking to parents, community members, why do you want your children to go through this district or go through the school system? And almost unanimously, the staff were identified as one of the strengths of the school district. And students, even the group of students that I met with, all said the same thing. They've always had great teachers that say, what can I do to help you? That's the most common phrase that students identify the teachers say to them. So identify some of the descriptors were dedicated, skilled, responsive, above and beyond, caring, qualified, highly professional. And when I asked the staff, why do you work here? And the comment, or the quote, when I wrote it down, I wanted to make sure I remembered it, was that staff, particularly staff who worked somewhere else and then came here, they described the differences that from when they working somewhere else, it was, why do you need that? And here it's, how can I help you get it? And just that difference in philosophy made a significant difference to them, in that they feel supported in this district. They feel the community supports them, both financially and through volunteers and all the different school groups, PTOs, PTAs, the foundation, all the different groups that help support the school district. The staff feel that they get a lot of support here, and they wanted to make sure that I was aware of that. Which leads into the community piece. Sense of community both within the school, but there's also a lot of collaboration and cooperation between the parents at the school level. Parents noted a good sense of community and comfort at the schools. Students made a point of acknowledging that while the recent events that have occurred, the students don't feel they belong in those events, or that behavior does not belong here. And they do feel safe when they're inside the building, but they're as embarrassed of those situations as everybody else might be. And then in addition, Town of Scituate is supportive of the schools. Financial support, again, organizations such as the PTOs, Scituate Education Foundation, the METCO program, and the other community-based organizations that interact with and support the schools, as well as the different town departments. One of the comments that you'll see in the open-ended responses was earlier snow day announcements. Don't wait till 6 a.m. to cancel school. Do it the night before. And I can understand how difficult it is. As a Scituate resident myself, I know that it's like the sun can be shining out where I live, and it's snowing like the dickens on the other side of 3A. So it's always probably going to be a very tough call in a coastal community. Identified as district needs, I mean, communication across the board in all platforms, both social media, person to person. One of the attributes that a successful superintendent, they felt that a successful candidate would, the one word that everybody finally kind of worked around to was approachable. Someone who was welcoming, someone who was easy to approach, easy to talk to, put people at ease relatively quickly, and visible within the district. Staff would make the comment that, one of the key, it's like when you only get one first impression, and if your first impression is, and they're not saying this is not, again, this is not, it's not directed at any one person, but they're looking ahead. And that if the first impression is that you're walking around the school and you're on your phone and you're not interacting with any people, that's not approachable. And that becomes the first impression. And that's what they talked about the first 60 days, first 90 days, is just getting out and meeting people and establishing connections and introducing yourself to the school community. Students identified some issues around social emotional learning, stress, and anxiety. These were middle school students who there was representatives from 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and they talked about the transition between 5th grade and 6th grade, and what that was all about. You went to a new school, and you were lumped in a classroom, and you probably didn't know 2/3 of the kids who were in your classroom because they were all mixed up. All the Hadley kids gone all together, and that's generally who they first hang around with. Those are their only friends when they get there. The students they either played sports with at a town level, or were in the classrooms in their elementary school. But to hear the 8th graders say, well, I don't hang around with any of those kids anymore because the way you group together, you meet new people. And with project-based learning, you end up working with smaller groups, which helps you build and expand your friendships. And really, I saw that as an opportunity, and I mentioned it to the building principal who sat in the room with us. I said, maybe one of the things you should do is take these 8th grade students, and when the new sixth grade shows up, have some of them go to each classroom and talk about what's going to happen over your next 3 years. And coming from the students, it might be a more significant impact than the adults saying it, so to speak. But the principal heard all the comments too. So social emotional need. The other thing they didn't like was the what's the reporting system? The Aspen. Kids don't like Aspen. They don't like. I know there's some parents in the room. The students don't like knowing. No, the students don't like it that you can see their grades before they get home to tell you what it is.
I love it.
They like it because if they miss an assignment, it's easy to go and find what their missed assignment is, but they don't like you seeing their grades. I'm just passing it along. I told them I would share. And some of the open-ended comments also talked about a little bit about social emotional learning. There's always a concern with vaping now. Opiates has always been kind of like, right on the tip of your tongue. And then there's just the stress of a student trying to attain high academic standards to ensure that opportunities present themselves to them to move on to higher education or whatever they want to do. That the opportunity to decide what that is with them, not with somebody else. So that's the stress that they feel, is making sure that they maintain every option available to them. One of the things that was acknowledged that, the next superintendent needs to be able to establish a clear vision for the district that incorporates a shared vision with the elementary schools. One of the sixth grade teachers said that it takes about 30 seconds in the first day of school to figure out which students come from which school. And that should be seamless. The teachers feel that should be a seamless transition, that what I'm exposed to in fifth grade, every fifth grader across the district is being exposed to. So that's one of the things that we talk about the needs. Is making sure that that's being done and that's being led from the front. Facilities, it's already been talked about to death, but that's clearly one of the issues that's facing the next couple of years, and it's going to take up a lot of time, is what's the plan, ultimately deciding what it is that you want to do, close one school, build a new school, renovate 3 schools, whatever the case might be. And then if redistricting happens, which I really kind of thought was funny. I forget who said this, and if the person's in the room, you can put your hand up. But they said, well, Scituate always, they always claim that the elementary schools are neighborhood schools. They're neighborhood schools. Yet most of our students live on the other side of 3A, and there's no school there. I don't know who said that, but all the schools are on this side of 3A, but a significant number of students live on the other side. But anyway, as far as professional experience goes, there's a really strong belief that the next superintendent should have some teaching experience, building level administrative experience, and hopefully, desirably, central office experience, preferably as a superintendent or assistant superintendent. It's felt that the transition from building level administrator to superintendent would be a challenge, only because of the different responsibilities in those 2 positions, without having spent any time in central office at all. So again, they're building their vision of what they think is the perfect superintendent. So this is what we're sharing. Commitment to districts, they'd like to see demonstrated commitment to districts, not somebody just moving around from one space to another space. Having actually done things and then initiated something, saw it through, assessed it, evaluated, and so forth. And again, communication skills, approachability, visibility, personal ethics, consistency. What the person says to this person, it's the exact same thing they say to someone else. The message doesn't change. And just that And, ideally, with all of those things, someone with a financial background and someone with a special education background. So again, if you're building your perfect superintendent, they're going to have all three. The reality is that that doesn't really happen. Superintendent candidates typically come from three tracks. Curriculum and instruction, building level administrator, and kind of progress up through the ranks, teacher, principal, central office. Then there's the special education track where you might be a special education aide, special education teacher, move to a special education director, and maybe pupil personnel services. But that building level administrator is typically skipped over, and not always, but it's typically skipped over in that position. And then, the finance person who might be started as a teacher, but most have come out of business school or MBA programs and moved into school finance, and again, not have been a classroom, maybe secondary classroom, post-secondary classroom, I should say, or maybe out of the private field. But that's where the three tracks generally come from. And then the last and most important thing that people stress was, stay the course, but look for improvement. Assess, evaluate, listen, ask questions, do a true and accurate assessment prior to walking in and making changes. I mean, if something glaring is there, fine. As long as you can articulate why the change is necessary, people will go with that. What most people are afraid of is just someone's going to come in and blow it all up and start all over again. That's a fear. So, in summary, some of the questions that I asked in each group, and then I've rolled in responses from the open-ended, from the survey, and the open-ended responses were, what are the core competencies and important skills you would like to see in your next superintendent? Demonstrated knowledge of the budget development process, including the ability to publicly present the budget details in a public forum credibly. Experience in the development of a school district budget. Experience in the development of a facilities plan. Experience as a classroom teacher. Experience as an administrator. Preference to a candidate with prior superintendent experience. No one wants to mandate it that you have to have had superintendent, but they think some extra bonus points should go to someone who was had successful experience. Excellent communicator who is approachable, visible within the schools to staff and students. A regular participant in community activities, somebody willing to go all in. And possess a dynamic leadership style based on consistency, credibility, and fairness. Some of this is duplication because it's coming from both the online survey and the focus groups. Again, the challenges, interaction with the different stakeholder groups, getting to know them, getting to know what the different community groups or what the foundation, what their role is, and at what level do they participate. Next year is going to be a bargaining year. You're entering the third year of a teacher's contract, so that's going to come up, and that's going to be something that's on the horizon. The facilities plan again. Joint vision for all schools, but in particular the elementary, developing shared vision for those. That doesn't mean losing it was clear, it doesn't mean losing the personality of each school. No one wants to take away the school's personality, but the curriculum should be consistent. It's like, this is what should be done, not necessarily how you do it. Excuse me. Ability to prioritize spending and then articulate how the priorities were developed. That was a big thing. Trust and credibility need to be established. Communication builds trust and respect. Build relationships, priority number one for the new superintendent. So what are the challenges the next superintendent will face in years 2 through 5? And this one statement kind of covered on. This is a statement made by an individual person. Superintendent needs to be a visionary leader who can motivate the teachers and staff, provide a direction to the school to grow and develop good working relationship with the leaders in the town. The superintendent should be able to tackle the specific needs of a school system in all phases of budgeting, student learning, and innovative educational practices, and celebrate diversity, respect for all, and cultural awareness. So this report represents the cumulative information collected from the online survey and the focus groups. Again, like I said, I really want to thank everyone who participated in all of it. It was great to see so many responses from parents and community members on the survey. and then participation in the parent community focus groups. My biggest fear for those 2 focus groups was I'd walk into that room and I'd be by myself. Because that's happened before. That didn't happen. I was very happy and surprised with the turnout, but also the participation level of everybody that was in the room. So I guess the next step is formalizing and finalizing the search committee,
Yes.
who will begin their work in 2 days.
And Janice, before we go on, is all of this going to be put on that superintendent search
Yes.
section?
Yep.
Except for the comments? Or-
Well, except for the open-ended comments. It's the reason, this is the summary report for the whole thing, and this should go. This would be,
At least that.
yeah. It's just the aggregate.
It's a lot of
data.
good detail, I'm sure
Yeah.
other people want to go through it at some point.
No. The other, one of the other questions in the survey that I didn't share here was if you had an opportunity to ask a question of the candidates, what question would it be? That's been collected, and I have it that I'm going to give it to the search committee once we meet, so that they can look through it as they begin to develop the questions for the preliminary interviews. So it gives them a foundation of questions submitted by the different stakeholder groups here in Scituate that you can begin to look from. And they'll get that on that first meeting, Wednesday.
When was this job posted? A couple of weeks ago?
No,
No, it was
January.
Beginning of January.
Yeah.
So,
It's been out for 6 weeks.
Do you know how many applicants we have?
Doesn't matter what it is now. It's what it is Thursday. You know, statistically, 70% of our applications come in the last 4 days.
Really?
Yeah. And half of those come in the last day. And it's mostly because they're waiting for people to finish their letter of reference. Because one of the things we tell candidates is that generic letters of reference aren't going to do you any good. The letter of reference should be specific to this district. So it means they have to get people to write it. And sometimes people turn that letter of reference around really fast for the candidates, sometimes they don't. But, so I don't even worry about numbers till Thursday. I can tell you, we've been averaging 25, 27.
For other searches?
Yeah, for similar districts. Wow, is that a lot, or?
Thank you.
No, somebody said wow when I said that number, and I don't know if that's wow, like that's all, or wow, oh, that's a lot. It's actually, we've seen the number of candidates rise in the last 2 years. 5 years ago, if you got 12, you would have been happy, because there just weren't that many candidates out there.
So, ready to talk about the search committee?
Yes. Did you want to present that, Jim, or did you want to?
Well, I think you should be honest with you, because it's your committee, and I just.
Yeah. So we had a lot of interest in people to be on the committee. And one change we might have to vote on is the teacher representation, SGA rep, because we had some other staff interest. So the list that we have is being adjusted on what we had voted on. So in order to move forward with this committee, with this, the search committee, we need to vote on
I had only one question. The selection is a voting and non-voting member.
Well,
They're all voting members.
they're all
In the past, the selection has not been a voting member of the search committee.
If I'm going to ask a person to sit through 20 hours worth of interviews and put in 40 hours of their time to prep for that stuff.
Yeah, but it's not your committee.
I understand that, but
It's a committee, it's every person that puts in the time to put.
You're a consultant.
I understand that, sir, and, but as someone who's been doing this for 24 years,
Well, I've been hiring superintendents for 36 years.
okay,
So,
usually the members of the search committee are voting members, but again, it is your committee?
it has not been our practice in Scituate.
Why wouldn't they be voting?
Because it's a school committee job.
No. The search
understand,
committee,
I
they have their
understand
input,
that, but we invite them as a courtcy, and we respect their contributions.
But you could say that about every other member, every other non-school committee person.
Well, they're not elected officials.
So like 3 years ago, John Dennehy was a voting member.
He was?
Yes.
No, he wasn't.
The town administrator would not have been if she had
I
come
mean,
to the meetings.
You're right. I stand corrected. He was the town administrator.
Yeah. But I remember John Dennehy was given a vote. And she gave a lot of good insight. It was good to hear from a town perspective.
John was a valuable member of that team.
So Janice, can you just tell us what, from our original vote, what has changed on this? So we just got
The
this right
STA
now.
representative,
So
to
it
the
was-
teacher it was two.
It was 2 STAs and 1 teacher, now it's 1
STA,
STA and
two
2
teachers,
teachers.
one special ed staff. No, and I'm sorry, one paraprofessional.
She was just revoted.
Yeah.
How, just, can you just explain why we did that, just because you had?
Because we had interest
Okay.
in people being on the committee, and, you know, we want to have people feel like their voice and it's tough.
Are there any groups not on this list that express interest? I'd say like from a district staff perspective, not necessarily
Not at
from.
all, no. So we need a motion.
Make a motion to update the superintendent search screening committee as presented. Does that work?
Second. As
Do you want to
amended.
read them all?
The last time we read them all.
Do we have to change the make, because we didn't vote on the makeup of the
Yes,
last
we
time?
did, yeah.
So my motion was just to change the makeup. So you have to list each one, because everything.
Yeah.
So we choose school committee.
I make a motion to update the superintendent search committee as follows. 2 school committee members. This is one motion, right? 2 school committee members, 2 administrators, 1 STA rep, 2 teacher representatives, 1 special education staff member, 1 paraprofessional representative, 1 Metco representative, 1 town of Scituate representative, 1 community member at large, 1 student representative, 3 parent representatives, and 1 special education parent.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So read off what's presented, and then, so the 2 school committee members are myself, Nicole Moreno-Laney, the 2 administrators, Donna Moffett, Paul Donlin, the STA rep, Eileen Lottie, the 2 teacher representatives, Kate Martin and Jim Thomas. The special ed staff member is Gail Morasso. The paraprofessional representative is Denise Fairhurst. The MECO representative is Michelle Crawford. The town Scituate representative is Karen Conley. The community member at large, Elizabeth Good. The student representative, Chloe Vitale. The parent representatives, and they each represent the school, on the school level, elementary, middle, and high school. Lori Withrow, Molly Good, and Chrissy Lauer. And the special ed parent is Amy Peschel.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's a relationship between Elizabeth Good and Molly Good.
I don't
That's all.
think so.
It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
You didn't pick it up.
So there's no relationship?
No. And, yeah. I mean, it was a difficult, it was, you know, it was pretty much individual. Any questions on this?
So at this point, you're going to be 15 people that are going to go out and sign up?
Yes. Bonnie will send emails out to everybody who expressed interest.
All of them will get something tomorrow.
But I guess my only question is, what if someone backs out now? Do we put second, third, or fourth, depending on improvement?
We could go to the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure if someone backs out at the last minute because of the time commitment.
Yeah, oh no, every
Yeah, we
position
can-
had, like a second person.
I assume that when they know these people who have interest is that they're expected to make every meeting.
Yeah, oh yeah, the whole schedule was put up on the website in the time stressing that they had to do training.
Yeah, Mike, I'm more concerned something came up, you thought you could do it, and then all of a sudden it's like, I can't do the week of the 16th, so.
Yeah.
I can't, you know.
No, yeah, I thought of that.
And I want to make sure that any vote we take doesn't, you know, constrict you in any way. I just want to make sure it's clean and you can start on like Wednesday, Thursday.
I'm sorry?
I just want to make sure you guys can start like Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, the first meeting that is for the search committee is on Wednesday. That's an orientation training. The town clerk would like me to make sure the search committee is aware of the open meeting law, conflict of interest law, and ethics law before she will sign them in or swear them in or something. So that will happen at that meeting. And then we'll outline the process and the dates and everything going forward. But when the letters went inviting people to participate, it went with the schedule, with these are the dates and times of everything, and don't put your name in if you can't make these. So I'm based that these people submitted their names, they've looked at the schedule, and as of now, you know, they're good with the schedule. But yeah, I understand your concern about something changes.
Do you have a question?
I just want to say, this process has taken so long that, and we're only finding out tonight if we're on this. Now it's like a big shuffle to rearrange some things. So in the future, if there's any way to make it so that you find out you're a part of it in advance of 2 days of the first meeting, like I'm going to make my schedule work, but there's some really big conflicts that have popped up since I said I was available.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, in fact,
think we
Christian
wanna-
has a big, huge event on the 19th, which is one of the interviews, which now 3 members of the team would be, in fact, I know it's something for 5th grade, so that one technical. Just so maybe the next time could be a little more time in between when we find out and the first meeting.
No, I would have liked it this, you know, been gone smoother, but we're on a tight schedule.
What took so long?
Oh,
What we're talking about?
well, we're taking in all the requests, and then we finalize it. We didn't want to, we're voting on it tonight. Tonight is scheduled to vote. So I guess I need a motion to the committee.
Move to appoint the committee as presented.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's all I got.
Review and finalize Taylor's advertising.
Advertising closes on Thursday.
Qualified select. Okay.
I know it's late, but just, you know, just quickly, the advertising consisted of a direct mailing, 2,300 pieces of mail, and an email blast that went out twice with the information that has about 7,000 recipients on it, that email list.
Yeah.
And a lot of in-kind contributions, meaning in-kind in that website postings, internet postings, you know, the intergalactic search when it goes on the internet. Placement officers at colleges and universities that offer advanced degree programs in educational administration. There was no, the committee didn't authorize any paid advertising, so we didn't do any of that.
Qualified selection. All right.
And so the communication will go with all these people tomorrow, or?
I'll do it tomorrow morning. I'll let them go out. And it'll also include those dates once again, so that they know exactly what we expect.
Any other questions?
Can I ask one question before you adjourn?
Yep.
And just so that everyone's being clear, we're going to get any updates from the superintendent between now and Friday, if any changes on candidates. Candidates start Saturday this week, and I'm extremely concerned about that, you know, we don't have enough information to form an opinion to discuss whether we need to talk about whether that trip goes forward or not.
So, Mike, I agree. I would just admit that I'm not a person that could make a decision. I mean, would we want to employ maybe the nurses in our district and see what their thoughts are to give us advice?
No, I don't think they can, you know, it's beyond that. It's a question of what's the federal government saying? What's the CDC saying? What's the NIH saying? What's the government saying? What's the situation in Quebec, right? And is there any, are we posing any risk by allowing kids to go to Quebec this weekend? And I have, I mean, I'm telling you right now, I have real concerns about Florida trips and France. And I think, you know, we're going to take a real serious look at that. And I know people get disappointed and all that, but our function is trips that we sponsor, our responsibility is the kids' health and safety.
I'll ask Warren to reach out to them.
I think he said he was going to do that, but I just wasn't sure about that.
I think sooner rather than
Yeah, before the weekend.
Make sure we get an update by Wednesday. Because if we need to meet,
Right.
it would have to be very 24 hours.
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Make a motion to adjourn at 9:34.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.